This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through the beautiful Roswell Pro Audio Aztec tube microphone, mixed through Isotope, Ozone, RX, and Neutron, all on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
It's like a mini gobo that is just like 12 inches by 12 inches or 10 inches by 10 inches. Maybe it's about, I think mine, I have about a quarter-inch piece of plastic, and on both sides I have about a half-inch foam, quarter-inch of foam.
Yeah.
And it's about 10 inches by 10 inches, and I just took a mic clip, and I just took the mic part of it off, and I cut a hole in the bottom of my 10-inch by 10-inch square, and then I screwed the mic clip onto the bottom of that, and that way I can put it on a mic stand. I can put it on a short mic stand, I can put it on a tall mic stand. I use it between a hi-hat and a crash cymbal sometimes. Maybe it's a floor tom and a ride cymbal, where, you know, they're playing the ride cymbal, and every once in a while I hit a floor tom, and you can't even tell it's a floor tom because it's the ride cymbal bleed. But that's basically what it is, like a mini gobo kind of thing.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. At Isotope, tone shaping is topping the charts. Meet the Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Plasma's flux saturation technology brings dynamic warmth and depth to your mix. Aurora takes spatial audio to new heights with lush adaptive reverb, while Cascadia adds exciting delays to your mix, retaining clarity through its smart unmasking feature. Get 10% off Plasma, Aurora, Cascadia, or any of the Isotope plugins with the special code ROCK10 and make your mixes rock at isotope.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Charlie Waymire, a music producer, recording engineer, and mixing engineer based in Los Angeles with a career that began behind the drum kit. As a drummer and musician, Charlie developed a passion for capturing the essence of sound, gradually transitioning into the world of audio production. His journey led him to establish Ultimate Studios Incorporated, a place where Charlie records, produces, and mixes music for artists across many different genres. Charlie's hands-on experience as a musician guides him as a producer and an engineer, understanding the creative process from an artist's perspective. This allows him to capture authentic performances and help guide artists in crafting their best work. As a career drummer, Charlie wanted Ultimate Studios Incorporated to have a great sounding and affordable drum room where he has had the pleasure of working with some of the best drummers in the world, including Chad Smith of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Ray Luzier of Korn. Did I pronounce that name right, Charlie?
Mm-hmm. Luzier. It's like loose ear.
Ray Luzier. Okay, Luzier. Okay, groovy. Ray Luzier of the band Korn, Oscar Seaton of Lionel Richie, and Stephen Wolf with Dr. Luke and Alicia Keys, to name just a few. With a focus on sonic quality and artistic collaboration, Charlie has built his reputation as a trusted partner for artists seeking professional recording and production services. His dedication to both the technical and creative sides of music production has made him sought after in the Los Angeles music scene, committed to helping artists achieve their full potential. But, he says, the real star of his studio is, of course, his dog, Delilah. She actually runs the show, and Charlie mainly makes coffee. I know how you feel, Charlie. I've got Daisy, the studio dog, myself.
And if you hear any snoring right now, it's not me. She's literally at my feet.
Oh, awesome.
Out.
Well, you know, my mixing skills are very strong. We probably won't hear any snoring. Special thanks to Matt McGlynn at Roswell Pro Audio for making our introduction. Thank you, Matt. Please welcome Charlie Waymire to Recording Studio Rockstars. Charlie, my man, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready to rock, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This is an absolute pleasure.
Dude, it's great. It's great to meet you, and it's great to have you here on the show. It's always fun for me to go and learn more about a new guest just by checking out all the stuff on your website and, seeing things you're doing. And of course, you're joining us from your control room with this great looking video of, shot of the console behind you and the treatment in the room. And it looks like a whole bunch of drum heads. Are those are those signed old drum heads, snare heads on the wall? I get
all the drummers that come through to sign. So this whole, you can't see it in this shot, but the whole wall, and then in the front lobby area, basically that entire wall is all the different drummers that have come through the studio.
That's cool. So now is that would that be like a particular head that went on a kit for that session, and then when the session's over, rip it off, sign it, and put it up? Or
occasionally, I just started keeping all my old heads. So, if I get somebody who's a Remo guy, I can have them sign a Remo head. If they're an Evans guy, I've got a pile of Evans heads.
That's great. That's
that
great.
way.
Maybe I can get guitar players to sign discarded guitar strings. What do you think?
You got to roll them up and like frame them in little frames like a gold album, and and hang them on the wall.
Just put them up there and hope they don't like unravel and take somebody's eye out from the wall.
There's got to be somebody who could make some cool piece of art out of an old guitar string and then have them sign in the center.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool, actually.
Let's recycle, rock stars. Well, cool. So let's see. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Now, of course, I read your intro, which talks about your past as well, not even your past, your start as a drummer. I'm quite confident you're drumming your ass off right now, daily. But getting to the point of getting interested in music and getting to having this wonderful studio and working with a lot of great people. Give us the brief journey of your story from start to where you're at now.
Yeah, I don't play as much as I used to. I mean, I still do for some clients, but it's not as daily as it was, back when that was my main focus. But
that's because you're not in Nashville. If you were in Nashville and you knew me, I'd be like, dude, come on over. Let's jam.
You know what? I may have to just start making some trips out there.
There you go.
But I started, I actually started on piano in the very beginning and kind of quickly moved to drums. And my piano teacher, who was also my drum teacher, because I'm from a small town, was like, I think, we need to, told my mom one day, we need to move him to the drums. That's what he really wants to do. So I started that really early. So I kind of knew, when I was a kid, this is what I'm going to do. This is one way or the other, I'm going to be doing this forever. But as far as like career-wise goes, there's kind of two pivot times where what led me to the direction of running the studio. I'd been fortunate to do a lot of touring. I toured all over Europe, all over the States, played with some great, artists. I've been a sideman a lot. I was signed to Universal with a band called Speak No Evil, which was a really great band, all really great musicians. And it was on the road with them. This would have been 2000, 2001 sometime. That was my first kind of real pivot into what was going to be 20 some years later. Because about two weeks into the first tour I did with them, the last thing I wanted to do was see drumsticks. Like pick them up, play on a pad. I'm like, I can't do this. So I had a G4 laptop, those original titaniums. I had an early version of Final Cut. It was 1 or 2, and I had Pro Tools free. And that band, since I had this huge refrigerator electronics rig, so I would just make up new intros and outros because I was triggering stuff from their albums all night long. So I would make up new intros and outros for things just sitting in the back of the RV with Pro Tools free, since you couldn't save anything. I had to export it, then it was done.
Oh, yeah. 4 tracks, I think, right?
I think it was 8, but it might have been 4. It wasn't very many, So, but that was great because I could never get stuck on anything. It's like, you make it, I export it, and once I quit, it's gone, and I'd use it for the next night or two, and I'm like, I'm going to make something else up, and I just that's kind of where I started going, this is how I could, all these electronics. I had 2 Kai S S3000 or S,
the samplers.
Yeah, it was the later model than that. It was either the 3 or the 5000. I don't remember. Right. But we had that. I had a big Mackie mixer. So that was really where I kind of started going, this is just cool. I was just having fun with it. And when I got off the road from those couple tours I did with that band, so this would have been like 2002, I started a little home studio, and then I got my place in Hollywood, which it was just me and a friend of mine. We were just going to write music together, but I had my kit set up all the time. And I had friends that did TV shows, so I did a lot of stuff for like Malcolm in the Middle and some other Disney and a few other shows. I can't remember off the top of my head. But a good friend of mine was the music editor on a lot of that, and they would do a lot of the writing with the composer, so we just do all sorts of tracks. And then as I did more of that, I had drummer friends of mine that would be like, hey, that sounds pretty good, can I just come over and I'll just use your gear, and I just need to record this thing for my band, all independent artists. I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So that started happening, and then it was like, hey, can I bring my bass player with me? Can you do bass too? Yeah, sure, no problem. So now it's drums and bass, and they're like, hey, do you know how to record guitar? Can I just, yeah, sure, no problem. And 3 or 4 years into this, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm spending more time recording everybody else than I was. I wasn't writing any of my stuff anymore. I was still doing a fair amount of sessions, but I was doing more for everyone else, just kind of by like, yeah, sure, come on, let's do it. And the next thing I knew, I was in a space about the size, I know you can't really see it in the video, but this is about 300 square foot control room. That was the size of my entire room when I had in Hollywood. And I was doing live bands. I'd have drums in one corner. I'd put, if there was a singer, we'd put him in the other corner. I'd have bass in one corner, keys in the middle of the room somewhere, like next to the room mic. Hey, don't hit the keys too hard. You're in the room mic. Guitar player or bass player in another corner. And I kind of one day was like, I'm sitting on the floor just going like this, hitting record on the keyboard. I need more room, and I love doing this. And that's when I started actually searching for a place either that was already built or a place that I could build a bigger space to do more of that. And, I kind of glossed over like time frame there, but that was over a good 6 or 7 years that all of that was happening, so it didn't just happen overnight kind of thing. But that day is sitting in literally just on the floor. I had an old Allen and Heath console, and I'm just like, okay, I hope I hit the right button, on the keyboard. And everybody's recording. I'm like, yeah, I need more room. And that's where I came this direction.
Now at that time, did you end up finding that you could still stay in Hollywood?
No.
At that time, or was it like you had to go outside of the popular zone to find a large enough space?
I had to go outside. I mean, I was kind of a little, at that point, tired of Hollywood, because this now would have been about 2011, 2012-ish, and the areas had started to change quite a bit, and even then, the prices were very, very expensive. So I started looking in pretty much everywhere around the city. I mean, when I say everywhere, I mean over about 3 months, I'll bet I looked at 200 places.
Wow, that's
if
dedication.
I had an open second, I was like, okay, find a place there. No, that area is a little rough. I can't see my clients being too happy at night coming there. Mark that one off. Damn, that was a good price though. So it took a while. I mean, oddly enough, the very first place I looked at is right next door to where I'm at. And after that whole thing, I looped back around going, man, I'm going to call that first place back and see if it's still open. And it wasn't. But he's like, hey, I got another one that's going to open up in a month or so. I said, can I just come look at it? And I think National Geographic was actually in here because they let us come in and look, and there was all these like little cities built on the floor, and there were burnt dummies in the corner.
Left over.
Yeah. I think they were working on
Shrunken
ideas
heads.
for episodes. Yes. There was literally like charred, burnt bodies in the, dummies in the corner of the building. I was like, man, what are they doing in here? So I ended up circling back around to the very first place, and luckily he had another spot because where I'm at, I'm with no traffic. I'm not even 20 minutes outside of Hollywood, so It's not a far drive. Parking is easy, which is huge now. Street parking is easy because it's a cul-de-sac. Also behind the building, I've got a lot, so I never have a problem. And actually, right down the street, about 100 yards, I'm pointing like you guys know. I don't know why I do that. 100 yards that direction. Is where they filmed The Office. So Dunder Mifflin, the Scranton Business Park. Yeah.
So have the paper clips finally come in?
Yeah.
So what part of, what's the name of the area?
Technically, it's Panorama City, but
that's
a
name.
block east is North Hollywood, and a block west is Van Nuys. So I'm like in that. I'm dead center of the valley, between the 405, the 170, the 101, and the 118.
Is that near where Burbank is?
Yeah, I would say this is semi-Burbank adjacent.
Right, Burbank is Valley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
That's what I thought. It's been
About
years
10
since
minutes.
I was out there, but I started to get like an understanding of the lay of the land in LA. Well, that sounds great. And then I know that particularly out there, property. I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at or what your situation is, but I'd say for most people I know in arts and music, the ability to purchase a building or a house can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
Out there and stuff like that, unless maybe you land somewhere where it's, the low prices first before it's exploded.
Which I don't know if there's any place like that out here anymore.
Yeah. And Hollywood, like to describe Hollywood a little bit too, my experiences were probably early 2000s, and there was still like this cool, funky, like old wild kind of hippie scenes where like, people had these. There was the band I was working with was renting a house that was in a block with a little tiny collection of houses. And then like inside was where the landlord lived, who was an old hippie. And then there were like weird things like, stuff like you'd be like, oh, look at that. The second story of this place is a school bus that's like been parked there. And, and you can walk across it and then everything kind of looks and feels like a movie set,
Yes.
The other thing I remember about showing up in Hollywood at that time was you land and you get in the car and somebody, they picked me up at the airport and they're like, and I'm headed to where they live. And it's like, everything just started smelling like flowers. And I was like, whoa, I guess it depends on the time of year.
Yeah. That time was a really still a pretty cool time of Hollywood. There was a lot of character, It really started to change when they started tearing down old stuff and building a lot, like really building, like all in on it, which, 2000, they redid the Kodak Theater right in the middle of Hollywood. All that area changed right in 2001, going into 2002. But the rest around 2010, all of a sudden they were tearing down a lot of old buildings. High rises were going up. The prices were going up. Just the vibe was changing. I mean, there's still cool stuff there. And I'm sure depending on your age and what you like, there's always cool things. But for me, it had just morphed a little, and knowing that I wanted to grow the studio because I was just really loving what was happening, staying in Hollywood wasn't an option anyway. And I think being a little outside where it isn't as busy. I mean, come 4 o'clock, my street is a ghost town, which is actually kind of nice. You can walk out on the street, and I almost don't even need a patio there at night. You just walk out and you just kind of hang there, and it's quiet, and you don't have all the helicopters and the hustle and bustle. So creatively, that's kind of nice. And
I know LA, it can be a real challenge to get from one place to another at the wrong time of day.
Yeah.
But I think, if your timing is right, it's not that challenging or whatever. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm kind of on the edge of how far I was willing to go away from the middle. But the Valley has so many musicians. It's crazy. I mean, it's insane. There's just down the street from me, there's like 3 other studios. Still,
wow.
And a lot of one of the big rehearsal studios is just down the street. So, most people I'm working with are somewhere in the Valley or the Hollywood area anyway. So, it's 20, 25 minutes at max.
And what'd you call it again? You said it's called, referred to as Panorama City?
Panorama City, yep.
Cool. So let's comment on that for just a sec for anybody who's thinking about it. Is a typical studio schedule and musicians' schedule like nicely offset from traffic in Los Angeles? Or is it just, in other words, if you run a studio that's sort of banker's hours, you're screwed as far as getting there and back.
It
on
definitely
a certain
makes
level
it,
or not?
Yeah, well, it makes it difficult. I don't do too many sessions that start at 9 in the morning, or even 10 in the morning. 10 is probably the earliest. And that's usually for people who were either coming from a long ways away and want to get, I have a handful of clients that are out in San Bernardino, so their drive's a good hour over, and they like to go early.
Right.
To beat traffic coming their direction. But most of the time, we'll do 11 o'clock starts or even noon. Just literally before we connected right here, a bass player that I have hired that's going to be coming in on session asked if we could do a early afternoon start because he's moved down to the South Bay area. So he's like, can we start at noon or 1 so I can miss most of the traffic? That way, when we're done, I'm going after traffic. So since I'm not technically a commercial studio, I try to do my best to work with everybody on start times to go around traffic. It just makes more sense to start at noon instead of saying, hey, we're going to start at 10, but you hit traffic and now you're an hour late. And then maybe somebody's irritated because of that, or even the person getting here is irritated because they've been in traffic. So it's like, let's just start later. Everybody can be relaxed, and then we'll have a good day of recording. So I try to work with it as much as I can.
It's a good strategy too. I mean, even in Nashville, it's becoming more and more. Every year, it's a little bit more like LA or something. You know, it's a little busier, and traffic can be a real pain at certain times of the day. But if we just sort of adopt a strategy for our own studios, where we just, you know, acknowledge that might be the case, and maybe if we have like a preemptive dialogue with clients, we could be like, hey, if you need, you know, we're going to do a session on such and such a day down the road. If you need a late start and a late end, let us know for traffic reasons. That could be appealing to some clients, I guess.
Yeah. And you know, there's nothing you can do about it. So you can get mad at traffic, but it's not going to stop it. It's just going to make you mad and, you know, anxious. So you might as well figure out either just it is what it is, or figure out ways to diminish its annoyance as much as possible.
That's like problems on a recording session, right? There's nothing you can really do to stop it. You just got to acknowledge that they come, and what are you going to do about it so you can keep the session moving?
Exactly. It's the same thing. Yeah.
So Ultimate Studios Inc., that's the studio. Rockstars, you can go, you guys have a website that they can check out.
UltimateStudiosInc.com.
Got some great images on there and stuff. Let me see if I can have a look at some of this. You know, you've built a drum room and a control room for everything. In fact, let me try this. Now that we're on YouTube, Rockstars, if you're listening to this on the podcast in the car or whatever, know that we're also a video podcast now. Very excited about it. So you can go see Charlie's wonderful face in control room. And then I'll do some screen shares here and there through the podcast, but we'll remember to talk a lot about what we're looking at.
Yes.
And see if that helps. So let me see here. Let me get rid of that and see if I can take a look at you mind if I share your website?
Oh, yeah. Share away.
Okay, cool. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull this off. I think this should give you a glimpse of the website. You seeing that as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, man, I need to update that video. I still have long hair.
All right, let's see what we got here. So if we take a look at the studio, oh, that's the same one, right? So you can kind of see on the top there, you've got a view from the drum kit. You've got a big enough space where you can have a full drum set that has got room to breathe, and you've got keys and amps across the room if you want to. That's awesome.
It's about 600 square feet, so it's decent size.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's great. 600 square. I mean, my whole studio footprint, I think, was only like 750, and that's for everything. So that's nice for so 600 for the recording room or for the whole studio?
No, the whole place is about 1,600 square feet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm 600-ish in the live room, just over 300. I can't remember exactly here in the control room. Then I have a small ISO booth. Literally, let me see if I can point right there behind me. That's kind of the airlock between the live room and the control room is an ISO booth that is just really, really dead. And then I have another little bit larger one in the back that also leads to my storage and my workbench and all the drum storage in the back.
Oh, well, if I talk shit about your studio on this podcast, it's just because I'm jealous. No, I would love to have a studio with lots of space. I mean, I have really enjoyed having something that feels cozy, which is typical of starting out as a home studio, you know? And I've been able to make a really wonderful place that works that way. But I've done some more recent recording in a larger space, particularly working with John Fiddle up at Relay Recording in Columbus, Ohio. And it was just such a reminder of how nice it is to just like spill out all your guitar gear and amps and have tons of room for everybody and you know, put room mics far from the drums and all that is a blast.
Yeah, you can go a little overboard. But, you know, just for some perspective, as much as I like the amount of room I have here, I've done a handful of sessions at Sunset Sound this year because we needed more space because of the size and what we were trying to do. So, you know, even I have to go to other rooms sometimes.
Yeah. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects. Perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Right, of course. Okay, so then now we're looking at a shot of the control room, and it says featuring the Trident 8832 channel console. So tell us a little bit about having a console in there, and you know, why have a console?
Honestly, that when I started the studio, I had no console. It was all outboard when I moved into this place, and it was great because you don't technically need a console anymore. You know, or you probably never really did once there was enough outboard pre's. But a couple years into working here, I put in a Toft, and instantly my workflow changed. And then a few years after that, I was lucky enough to do some work with Trident over the years, and I got to do the beta testing for the 88. So the console that you see in that photo and the one that's behind me is about 85% the prototype of the 88. And then about 2 years ago, I had them add another bucket of 8 channels into it for me, and we put the VU meters on instead of the LEDs. But that is probably the thing that changed my workflow here the most and sped everything up, because I got rid of a lot of my outboard that I wasn't using because the console sounds fantastic. I've got EQs everywhere if I need it. I have my patch bay and routing set up to where I don't need to patch. I'm 1-to-1 all the way through from the live room into Logic, so it can be really quick.
Let me say that back to you. Let me say that back to you. Make sure that we understand what you mean by that. So if you put a mic on the kick drum and you plugged that mic cable into mic line number 1 on the panel out there, it's immediately showing up at the number 1 on the console, and then going to Pro Tools or to Logic. You said, and then the return from 1 comes to fader 1 on the console too?
Yes. If I'm gonna mix analog that day, like just for monitoring, all, I don't have to patch anything. In 1, out 1, in 2, out 2.
Wow, that's so convenient. And you can easily read the patch bay because you don't have all those cables there.
Although if you see it, I don't know if you can see it right now. It's a little blurry. It is. I've been mixing, so it's been a train wreck.
Oh yeah, I don't know if we can see that far back, but yeah, no, I deal with that myself, and in fact, I'm in the process of totally redoing my patch bay and studio wiring with Trace Audio here in Nashville, and
I love those guys.
Oh yeah, they're great.
They made a combo jack that had a PCB on the back that saved so much soldering time for doing combination jacks, because if you've ever soldered that stuff, you know how much of a pain in the ass a combination jack is. And they made these awesome PCBs that at the time they were selling the jack with the PCB for only like $4 or $5. It wasn't maybe $1 more than what I could buy the actual jack for. And I added a whole new panel of stuff from them because of that. It was they're great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Ben was telling me, our future plan is I'm going to normal at the patch bay, normal inputs to different signal chains, so that same as you, I don't have to patch those things in if I don't want to. So I'll just choose like, what do I usually do? Because I tend to do. You notice this about when we're working in the studio, we do tend to like find something that works.
Yeah.
And often we might do that for a long time before, with only occasional changes too.
If I get to that point, that's usually when I just go ahead and hardwire it. You know,
Yeah.
if there's something that I have to do some patching on, and it's something that, like you said, you find things that work that just facilitate what you need to do. If it's been a year of me doing that exact setup and I'm like, okay, that's just the workflow, it just gets hardwired that way.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to patch bays, it's, you know, everybody's situation is a little bit different. And oddly enough, on my YouTube channel, that's some of the videos that have done the best over the years have been a few of the ones where I talk about how I've hooked the patch bay up and gone through that, because it can at first be daunting until you get a handle on it. And I did mine 3 times before I got it right. I mean, I
remember the first time I ever
twice.
saw a patch bay. I was like, it was in my college, and they're like, I'm like, oh my God, what's that thing down there? That looks so scary.
But it's actually, once you understand it, quite simple, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's see. So then scrolling down a little bit more, and we can see the gorgeous looking drum room there. It's awesome. I'm sorry. It's terrible. I said I was going to talk shit because I'm jealous. No, it really looks great. And I like all the lighting in there. It looks really cool too.
I want to see.
And then this is cool. So then you list all, like, lots of gear and mics and drums and everything. We'll get into all that. But, like, I noticed you go out of your way to list the drums themselves too. Now, is that just out of pride as a drummer, or do you find that it's actually been really helpful to have that ability to communicate with clients you're working with and stuff like that?
That page has become so helpful for me to just, you know, when especially if I'm talking to a new artist that I'm going to work with, and especially if they're coming in for drums, that I can just send, here's the link to the page that has everything so they can take a look at it beforehand. You know, I mean, I could do a PDF that way, but it's over the years, it's just been easier to send a link. Here, go check this out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's even a couple kits that I have now that aren't on that list. I need to update. They just came in recently, so I need to update that list.
Okay, and then you list gear and microphones and stuff like that. Now, who do you find is most interested in the gear and microphones? Do you find it's clients that sort of have an understanding of the engineering and the recording side, or is it artists that just think it looks cool, or is it engineers that are like, I want to do a session and I need to know what I'm going to be using on the session? That's
usually been engineers, if I have, or a producer that's coming in that looks at that stuff. And I would say there's a lot less of that than there is the instruments. Because if I'm not doing the project start to finish, if I'm working with another producer, because I don't really rent out the studio just to anybody coming in to engineer, because that's not my business model. So that's where I kind of differ from a traditional commercial studio. Right. But I do work with a handful of other producers that come in that either don't want to do the engineering side. Some of them even just admit, like, look, we need to get a ton of drums down, and it's been ages since I've done drums. You know, we'll defer to you and work together on it. So them, I would send a list. Okay, here's what I have mic-wise. Here's what I have drum-wise. If you're not bringing in your own gear, you know, and if there's something not on the list, we'll augment it somehow. But most of the time, the outboard gear, no one asks about that. At least for me, they ask more about.
Fun to see
you got the console? It is. Yeah, I know. You know, I'm a gear nerd. I'll admit it. I've got a problem. And
I've done sessions where I was, wanted to know every detail about what was going to be there at the studio because I was engineering or producing. I almost never have anybody ask about that coming in to work with me now, but it's because I'm working with artists who are just focused on the music and, they're thinking about their song and all that.
Right. I would say the vast majority of the work that I do falls into that kind of category too, Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Awesome.
Rookie
An old
mistake.
School telephone in the background too. Now we know we're legit, right?
It's not as cool as Chris Mara's place, but I'm trying to get that way.
Yeah. Well, who else had a telephone right there on the console is Bill Skibby at Key Club Recording in Benton, Michigan. When I was up there, he had this gorgeous Flickinger console that used to belong to Sly Stone.
Oh, that's cool.
And he built he and Jessica built this beautiful studio there, and he had just the red sort of like the bat phone just sitting on the.
That's cool, actually. I may have to steal that idea a little bit and put something up there.
All right, so let's see. I see you list lots of microphones and stuff like that, and we'll get into talking to use them. I see at the top of the list you got the Roswell Pro Audio.
Got a lot of Roswell
there.
stuff, man. I'm a huge Roswell fan.
You got the Colaris and the Delphos and the Delphos 2, the Mini K47, the Mini K87. It's also a little bit hard for me. Oh, there we go. Did that zoom in for you too when I just did that, or is it just on my
Oh, yeah, this is fantastic. There you go.
Oh, man, that's cool. There you go. Now everybody can see what I'm doing. All right, so the Mini K47 kick drum, that's another great mic. The K67 and the K47 again.
Yep.
And the K47X, sorry, 67X and 47X.
I pretty much have everything he makes, I think, almost.
Yeah, I have. I pretty much do too. You know, the only mic I think I don't have from Roswell Pro Audio is it's going way back, but he also built a voiceover mic.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I don't have that one either.
Yeah. And then the Aztec, the tube mic, which is sort of like an Elam 251. So, and of course I knew that too. So tell us a little bit about these mics and, say what you want to say about it. We can dive in on anything in particular if we want to. And actually just so happen to have a couple next to me. I
know you've got a nice little setup around you there.
I mean, I knew we'd probably talk about it. So I was like, let me just put them up and make them look cool.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of working with Matt for quite a while, actually, and from the first set. Oh, this is actually an interesting story. Let me start how this whole thing happened, because this is one of those times when I just wish I could slap myself. But it would have been AES in LA, I don't know, 2016, 17, somewhere way back then. I was just walking around and I ran into someone that knew me from my YouTube channel, but I didn't know him. And we just got chatting, and he's like, man, you got to go check this mic company out, this Roswell's. And at that point, they weren't on my radar. And so he took me over and introduced me to Matt, and I think he just had the 47 out. I think that might have been the only one at that time. And maybe the podcast mic too, I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he had the podcast, and Mini K47 is one of the first ones I was aware of.
And so we got talking, and it was cool. And he asked me, what it would take to get some video or be on one of the videos, that kind of thing. And I had just got done, or had recently done, a video for someone with some gear that I'm not gonna say any details about this. Let's just say that piece of gear that I did some video for wasn't really the greatest, and I oversold it a little bit. And I'm like, I'm not doing. I can't do that. And I don't want to do that. So I'm sitting here going, okay, here's another cheap mic. I had done a lot of work with MXL even over the years. I had a few friends there, and I'm like, do we need another one? I don't know. I got to check it out first. And I was a little bit dismissive, and we exchanged info, and I walked away, and that was it. No follow up from either side. A year and a half or so goes by, a little more than a year and a half, and I get an email from him. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Well, I'll check it out, fine. So he sends a pair, and I remember it was FedEx or UPS, I can't remember, dropped it off in the middle of a session. And I had my two former assistants that live in Taipei, one of them being a drummer. We were setting up, and Mike showed up. So I'm like, you know what, let's just throw them up as overheads. Let's just see right now. We'll test it out. So we tossed them up. I was playing, and Hao was engineering, and I just looked in the control room, and he's standing up just looking at me, and he's just like, come here. So okay, get up. We just soloed the overheads and played back, and I went, holy crap, that sounds really good. And instantly I'm like, I just thought to that very first meeting at AES, and I'm like, note to self, man, don't do that again, because you never know when that one's going to come back to bite you. And I remember emailing Matt right away and was like, wow, these sound really good. And that was the beginning of the relationship.
Was that the K47s? The Mini K47s?
Yes,
overheads?
He sent a pair for overheads, and I did some early videos, demo stuff for him, just with those as overheads, and from then on, I've just been a huge fan. He makes great stuff. He's also willing. He's made me some custom mics. I even have a couple custom ones out there that he's made to the kind of specs that I wanted, and it's good stuff that's priced. Man,
nice, dude. You're popular. Here, I'm pulling up. I'm pulling up just a glimpse at a video that I did on YouTube too about the Mini
cool.
K47. Hold on, I want to make sure that audio doesn't start blasting though. Because the same thing, when I got the Mini K47s, let me see if there's an easy way for me to show this to you too without actually showing the video. But I did a cool video to show them off too, and I just had a lot of fun. And at the time, I was like, how do I do this? And I was like, well, I really like making music and just writing songs and having fun. Mm-hmm. And also I'm a little bit silly, so why don't I just write a song about the mics? And so do you see that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, you can see that. And so then I just I did a video where I just used those mics on everything.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, and of course I was like, what am I going to call it? And that was whatever year that was, that seemed, that was the running joke right then because of the Lord of the Rings movies and stuff. But it was a lot of fun to do, and I think my intern kindly followed me around with an iPhone for 6 hours or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Recorded a whole song and talked about it. And anyway,
I mean, that really is a great microphone. I'm going to go check that video out. I have to see that.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes, Rockstar, so if you're curious to check it out too, you can see that there. Now he
the thing I really like about Matt is he just makes really good stuff. Like even his cheap stuff, cheap is very much the wrong word. The inexpensive stuff is really, really good. I mean, it punches way above its price point, like way above. And I would say every one of my recordings, no matter what, whether it's drums, I do a lot of full band recording all at the same time too. I would say at any point, 70% of the mics on that session are Roswell.
That's awesome, man.
I don't have to worry. I know them. They always work. If one doesn't work for a sound we're going, I can swap it out for one of the others, and it's going to get there, and I don't have to think about it. And I love supporting, smaller companies like that too, that just make something that's that great.
Yeah. So let me see. Going back and just looking at all the. I'm just going to look at the different models you've got. So when there's quite a variety, so like the Mini K47, the Mini K87, and obviously Rockstars, these are of a mic that Matt at Roswell Pro Audio has designed to somewhat emulate these original mics too. I don't know if Matt's intention is to, totally match it to an original, or I remember when he was telling me about it, he talked about the importance of, there are certain capsules that indicate which mic it's going to be, Right. I think the K47 is a reference to the capsule too, the K87 and the K67.
Exactly.
Right.
So the Mini K87 is not a U87 clone like some people think because they just see the number 87. It is referencing the capsule.
Yeah. And so they each have a slightly different sound. How do you describe some of those Mini K capsule sounds and how to decide, okay, I'm going to use, choose one for a particular instrument or a use case in the studio?
Yeah. Let's start with the 47 because that mic is kind of interesting to me in the fact that it's a large diaphragm condenser, but it reacts more similar to a small diaphragm, meaning the transient response on that mic is really good. It's kind of what I would expect out of a small diaphragm where you have really good transient response, but it still retains some of the roundness that I would expect from the large diaphragm. Does that make sense? So it's like, I don't know if that's why I think I like it on drums. Yes.
Yeah, it's got a clarity and an immediacy that reminds you of what a small diaphragm does.
Right.
So Rockstars, to think about it, a large diaphragm is physically more diaphragm that has to move back and forth with the sound. Small diaphragms, less mass. So I think small diaphragms typically are able to respond more quickly to the sound. Right. So that's why.
Obviously there's variations between all the mics somewhat, but I think that's a really good generalization of what they do. So you think of the large diaphragm as a little rounder, maybe a little more body in general, where you think of the small diaphragm a little snappier, maybe a little bit tighter sounding.
Quicker or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And then luckily.
And the 47 falls in that area of kind of quick.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. I was going to say, luckily, and hopefully, Matt from Roswell Pro Audio is going to probably scour through this video. And so, Matt, drop in if anybody wants to correct us on anything, just drop it right in the comments. That's the beauty of joining the video world now.
The last thing I would say one more thing about the 47 that I also find interesting for anyone in smaller studios. Its polar pattern seems to be a little tighter compared to the others too, which means it's going to get a little bit less of the room around it compared to other large diaphragms that Matt makes. It just seems to be focused. So if you are in a smaller room, your home studio or whatever, that can be quite a benefit sometimes when you want to mitigate as much of your surrounding and your overheads as possible.
Yeah, so you think of it as an overhead as a good use case for the 47?
Yeah, but not. That's any sort of percussion overhead would be obvious first choice, but I use it for a lot of electric guitar, especially with some of the death metal stuff that I have where they're just playing fast stuff, and we want some body from a condenser, but the condenser still needs to be fast enough to pick up some of that crazy picking, and I go right to the 47.
Now, Rockstars, we have a link to a playlist of the music that Charlie's making right in the show notes. So at any point you want to go check out a whole discography of his work, from death metal stuff to jazz to folk to pop music, you can just click through and get a sense of those. And if you, Charlie, even want to reference a particular record to a particular mic or anything we talk about in this conversation, you're welcome to do that too, because then maybe they can go look at, if you recall, I think I used it on this thing.
A lot of the guitars on the Necronomicon Ex Mortis band was everything that we did. Most of that stuff we actually do here. I mean, they're from the East Coast, so they fly out. We do these epic 9-day sessions. But most of the guitars we've done here, and it's usually a combination of dynamic and a condenser, and then we pick between the tunes or the sections what we need more of. And sometimes I just combine them. But a lot of that ends up being probably the majority of it being the Mini K, blend in the dynamic for a little bit of bite.
So that's the Mini K 47?
47, correct. Yeah, I should clarify that.
with when you say dynamic, do you mean like a Shure SM57 or something like that?
It'd usually be a Unidyne 3, which is in my opinion, the best 57. It's the pre-current model 57, and they are different. And I can prove that, empirically, because I've done plenty of testing between them. The Unidyne 3 is it's more open than a current model 57.
Right. On
snare, on guitars, everything. Usually it's that, or it's my old AKG D1000E. It'll be one of those two mics will usually be my... Or the third one that I've been using some now is the MAD from Mojave. Is also a pretty nice dynamic mic for those. It'll be one of those three.
Mojave is Mojave out there?
Yeah, they're over by, I think they're in Burbank actually.
Okay. Yeah, I think of like Joshua Tree and stuff for some reason. Okay, cool. Well, that's cool to hear. So that dynamic combo with a K47 gives you a little bit of what you are familiar with the 57 dynamic mic kind of sound, but the K47, by adding that, it gives a little. I remember the first time I tried that with a Neumann FET 47. We did the classic 57 and FET 47, and it was like, whoa, just when you incorporate the condenser mic into the blend, especially on heavy guitars. And you blend it just so, and compress it just so. It all of a sudden we had this rush of low end. That's the way I remember hearing it. It was like you do your chord or your power chord or your chunk or whatever that sound is, and then at the very end of that sound, as the sound gets quiet and the compressor can bring it forward, there's this new air and low end that just comes kind of like vroom.
And the FET 47 is a special mic when it comes to that. It's even on the outside of kick. That mic is everything that you've ever read about that mic online, in my opinion, is pretty true. But most of us just can't afford one.
Right. They're very expensive. Now, that's what's so exciting, too, when, along comes Roswell and they make this very, very affordable condenser mic, which is super useful in the studio. I use them all the time, and I love them.
Yep.
I love them. I got some behind me, so of course we can talk about, as we talk about them, I'll try and show them to you, Rockstars. But like down in the studio right now, I've been using the Aztec for a number of vocal sessions. We used it on saxophone. We used it on vocals. It just sounds really great. And I've got experience with an Elam 251, so I know what that sounds like. And this definitely has that quality. It's not, I don't have them side by side, and I don't even know if that would be useful to do that kind of comparison. But I do know that it reminds me of those qualities immediately. And then, there's a pair of mini, maybe it might be my 47s, I think, are on the piano right now. I've been using that on piano sessions, and it sounds beautiful.
Yep.
And I've done
my
a number
piano
of
right now has a pair of Colarises underneath and a pair of Delphos 2 on the top.
Ooh. I also found that the Delphos was like, we shot out a bunch for a jazz record I did years ago, and a pair of the Delphos was what we chose for the piano, and it just sounds beautiful.
I think the Delphos, specifically the Delphos 2, since that's the model that's out now, is probably, of all the mics he makes, by far the most versatile, because it's a mic that no matter what you're recording, it will work.
Okay, here we go. You
That's
finally
it.
mentioned one that I can
That's it.
bring it up to the camera for us. Now, I've learned that I have to cover my eyes if it's going to be in focus for you, so let me know if you can see it in focus okay.
That looks in focus to me.
This camera is too smart. Watch this. See my eyes? Did the mic go out of focus?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's pretty good.
Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, so Rockstars, if you got a camera that focuses on your eyes and you want to show people stuff, just cover your eyes. But this has got the, all right, I might have to put my readers on for this.
Yeah, you have a pad, 10 dB pad, I think, and you have 3 polar patterns.
Yeah, we got the polar switch right here. And then we've got the I'm sorry, did I say polar switch? The pad right here, 0 and 10 dB. And then on this side, we have the polar switch, which is gives us, what do we got there? We got figure 8 at the top, and then I think next is the
cardioids in the middle.
Cardioid, yeah, and then an omni option.
Yep.
And I've actually been using this a lot recently. I put this down. I sort of did an interesting thing just to try it, and I've been loving it. I put it in cardioid, although I think I want to hear it in omni this way too. But I did it upside down near the floor, across from the drum room. So my drum room isn't big like yours. So for me to get a mic away from out in front of the kit, I've got to go almost all the way up to the wall. So I put it down in that corner where there's some bass buildup. And then I've got the mic down like this in the corner, kind of like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's picking up the low end of the kick and the whole drum kit.
Oh, nice. Ooh, I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah, so that was a fun one. And then, of course, I love the Colaris. This is the Colaris 2 Rockstars. So I love that. When I was getting ready to make my own record, and I had I think it was a luxury. Where I was like, it's me, it's my record. I can shoot out all my mics until I decide which one I want to use for my voice. So I totally shot out 20 mics and had the video on myself and everything. And I ended up picking the Delphos. That was my mic of choice for my voice. And it's just, I still really love it. So, and I think maybe you can talk about that
as far as mic
too.
goes, it's also not ridiculously expensive. It's, I think, is it $7.99 or $8.99? It's right in that, price point.
I can't do it fast, but I can pull up the website. I think I got it right here. I can't do it fast because I'm not, in my 20s anymore. And I don't have my reading glasses on. But yeah, here's the Roswell site. So you can see a bunch of the mic choices. And we'll talk about some of these too, because you've got them. So why not?
Yeah, the Claris is another great one.
There's the Delphos right here. And if I click on that, yeah, I think at the moment, MSRP is $900 and it's on sale. So, oh no, I'm sorry. I just clicked on one of the discounted ones. So there you go. Yeah. So that was well, you can go get it if you want. It's there now. But that was a like a refurbished or a blemished one. But a new one is $9. So there it is. So that's cool.
Yeah, that is a fantastic all around mic.
And then let's see which one do you want to talk about next?
Well, let's go to the Claris since you brought that one up too.
Okay, great.
That is actually my favorite on overall pianos, or at least
really?
I have a Yamaha upright, a U1, which are kind of bright and very clean sounding. So sometimes getting some character out of it and a little bit of thickness is tricky or difficult. And the Claris does that without thinking about it.
Right. That's what I noticed about the Claris. So it has kind of a harmonic saturation ability.
Yeah. It is not that is a Mojo mic with some color. That is, there's two ways to use it. If you're not using it with the pad and you're just pushing straight into it, it will definitely add some really nice character. On a vocal, it can make a vocal just sit right here. I like it for a lot of female vocals because it usually adds a little bit of what the female voice tends to lack in like the low mid kind of body area, especially if the singer's in their upper registers. That mic just plays really, really well with that.
Right. That's the thing that I feel like I'm constantly trying to get better at understanding is that sometimes choosing the mic can be like choosing the opposite of the source. So if a vocal has body and low end but doesn't have lots of top, you might choose, and correct me if you think I'm thinking about this wrong, but you might choose a mic that has all that top and maybe less of the body and low end so that it balances out or counters it. Or, if a female voice has lots of top but maybe doesn't have the thickness in the middle, then you might choose a mic that brings that out, which the Claris does. Right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you can add on top of that decision-making process, you can add what the overall like aesthetic of the song that you're trying to get, because sometimes that'll make you choose the mic that you don't think is necessarily the best for the vocalist, but it fits the song. But I would say from a starting point, and probably the majority of the time, what you just said is perfect. Like, so if I had a singer that had a really pronounced upper mid-range, I probably wouldn't use the Aztec, because it's going to feature that even a bit more. That'd be a point where I would pull out the Claris, because it doesn't get rid of that, but it just doesn't bring more out, and it adds that a little bit of weight to the vocal.
Right. Okay. So here's the Claris up close, Rockstars, and it's got a sort of a unique mic holder too.
Now, what's another interesting thing about that mic, and this makes it kind of quite versatile also, the pad is not only a 10 dB pad as far as the input volume wise, it also takes out some of the saturation that's going into the transformer. So it actually cleans the mic up. So you can turn that on, boost your input gain back up 10 dB, and now you have a cleaner and noticeably different sound. And I've tested that with a few different vocalists, and even on acoustic guitar it can be quite obvious. Drums, overheads, it can be kind of obvious then as well.
Yeah.
So that mic doesn't have to be only color and saturation. The pad is kind of a volume pad and a tone switch in a way. Okay, and then the other side has got a low cut switch on it, which I don't know if you guys. How close can I get? Can you see that? Yeah, that looks like it's still in focus to me.
All right, that's pretty good. Fun having these fancy cameras now. But you have 3 different low cut options, and what makes sense to me about that is with vocal in particular, you might really want to be selective about what the low end is doing.
Yep.
And so having those different options gives you some of that choice, which is cool.
So the mic it's not a one trick pony kind of thing. And I think Matt does a nice job on all of his. I don't know. You got the mini K line, and then you have, I call it, the big three there that you have set up. That they all can do more than one job, but they're all different. They're not. There's no real redundancy in that line or his lines.
Now let's bring this one over.
This is one of my favorites.
I sort of carefully balance them up on these little mini stands. It's hard to find a mini stand that holds the mic just right.
I'll bet it is.
But this is so the stand is just what I grabbed, but this is the mic holder for the Aztec right here, which is a gorgeous mic.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really been enjoying having that in the studio. Sounds fantastic on vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, we have.
It's also awesome on drum overheads.
Oh, really?
It's actually that's what's up right now, and it's probably has not come off my overhead stands in the last 10 months.
And then we have the low cut on this side, and the pad on this side.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of.
And on the power supply, that has 9 different polar pattern selectors.
Right. I don't have the power supply handy, but. Yeah, good call. And this thing sounds really beautiful. I've just really heard it on voice, and then we were just doing overdubs in the same vocal booth, so that's why I was putting it on saxophone, but it sounded so great.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet it's great for sax. I haven't done any strings with it yet, or horns with it yet. I haven't done any strings with it yet either, but I'll bet it's good for that. Also, acoustic guitar, really nice for acoustic guitar.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so, it's fun when you have a collection of mics. It's really fun to try them out on different instruments, although sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge because you're like, you really got to do a lot in the studio to have an opportunity to try out and everything. Sometimes, if you play instruments yourself, Rockstars, then it can be... You give yourself that flexibility and that ability to I'm just going to try this mic on everything today and see what I think.
Or call a friend. We do that. My production partner, we do that a ton, and I'll get buddies to come over and just say, hey, can you come over and just play for a while? We're going to test, gear out. I kind of look at it like when I learned drums, and now that I'm relearning piano, you have to practice, right? It's the same thing if you're an engineer. You got to put the time in practicing, not just mixing. But if you're doing any tracking, the more you understand about whatever gear you do have, the better your recordings are going to be. But the only way to really understand that is off the clock work. You don't want to be doing that stuff. Trust me, because I've made this mistake of doing that sometimes on the clock on something and it didn't pan out. Don't recommend that. Practice on your own time because it will bear fruit. Like you took it. Which mic is going to be best for your vocals? You have a pretty good mic selection, so you've got the ability to try out a lot of different things to find what works best for your voice. So that is time, in my opinion, time well spent.
Yeah, and it was fun to do. And I have done versions of that with clients in the studio, but it's not something, I don't think it's something you can do automatically. And I don't think it's something you can even... Well, suggest is the wrong word because you do have to suggest it if you want to even just suggest it. But I don't even think you should say it's what the client needs to do. I think you should say as a client, somebody you're working with who is on the clock, you have this option. If you would like to find out which mic is most fitting for your voice and choose it yourself, we have that option. I find a lot of times, sometimes clients do like that, but other times they're like, I like the first one.
No. That idea is good. Let me clarify my statement a little bit more because that I actually think I have never had an artist say no to that. But the mics that I pick to do that test, I've picked because of all the off-the-clock hours of going through those mics and having a good idea of what they do. So, artist A comes in and they have this type of voice. I can kind of go, you know what? Okay, we're doing a rock thing. Well, I think one of these 2 or 3 mics would be good for your voice in that song. or maybe it's a jazzy thing and it's got, okay, well, I think one of these three, can we just do a quick test of these three? I think that is always worth, but I would never go, man, I'd love to try all 10 of these mics out. That's the part of the practicing I say you do on your own, so you can hone it down into when you're on the clock, you know that, hey, these 2 or 3 could work good. Can we take 5 minutes and test? I've never had an artist say no. And I've actually had a couple times going, look, try whatever you want.
That's smart. That's smart.
They don't know how dangerous that is, though.
Right.
That brain clicks on and I'm like, ooh.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks and mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, or reference a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity and impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, a.k.a. the second half of the show. My guest today is Charlie Waymire, joining us from Ultimate Studios Incorporated. And Charlie, you ready to jam?
I'm ready to do it.
All right, man. So we were still talking about cool mics and stuff like that. I think we kind of covered the Delphos and the Aztec and the Colaris. If you wanted to do a wrap up of just those three, and what if you had a vocalist in a male voice and a female voice, what would you comment on about how each of those three would be useful or not the right choice in that session?
Okay, I'm going to just put the one disclaimer that obviously any situation could be a little bit different. So it's a generalization or a starting point a little bit. First off, the Delphos 2, in my opinion, is the jack of all trades. It will work on about anybody's voice, on about any instrument. It's just one of those mics that does its job. You know, it's kind of what people say about that really love a U87 because it just works on everything. Matt's works on everything is the Delphos 2.
And to add to that, I think of it as having a very nice airy top to it, which
but not
maybe
bright.
I'm wrong about that.
No,
not bright.
It's airy, but not harsh.
Yeah, not harsh at all. But it can also handle signal, so it doesn't sort of crap out on you.
Nope.
It doesn't, not that any of the mics are crapping out, but it doesn't sort of.
It's got headroom.
It can handle. It's got headroom.
Yeah. The Colaris, when you want some color, some nice tonal saturation, or if you need to thicken a source up, you know, like I said, I use that on my U1 upright all the time because it adds some body that those Yamaha uprights don't always have.
What's
Same
a
with the voice.
U1 upright?
They have 3 different uprights, the U1, 2, and 3, and it's the height. It's how tall, with the U3 being, I want to say the U1 is 46 inches or 48, 46, I think.
We're talking about upright bass.
No, upright piano.
Oh, upright piano. Oh,
Yeah.
It. All right.
Now, upright bass. Well, okay, we'll get to that because that's a mini K thing I want to point out. But the Colaris I want some character, I need some thickness, or I have a vocalist maybe that has a very pointy mid-range. A lot of female vocalists have very strong upper mid-range, you know, but maybe lose some body, or even some of the male vocalists that are like power vocalists, you know, I'll pull out that Colaris, adds a little of that, evens out the top, and makes it sit right in your face. The Aztec is just smooth. There is a buttery vibe to it. If you need a vocal to come forward, it's the mic. Especially if you have a vocalist that's maybe a little thicker or darker and it's like, man, I need some presence. Put that mic on because it'll pull it forward, but it doesn't do it in a nasally way. And it's not like a high-end boost kind of thing that's just boosting top end to make it happen. It just, It's focused.
I always, for some reason, I think about the Aztec or an Elam 251, maybe because this is the context in which I first used it and learned about it, as a condenser mic that can do what a dynamic like an SM7 would do for a vocal in a rock band situation.
Just
because there's times, I'm not comparing. I'm not saying it sounds like an SM7, but I'm saying that I've done band stuff in the studio where I put a vocalist on a high-end condenser mic with a thick, band track behind it, and the vocals just seem to disappear into the track versus using a SM7 and the vocal steps forward in the track.
Right.
And then, but again, with the Aztec, I noticed, so it kind of helps the vocal step forward in the track in a cool way too.
Yep, absolutely. And having the polar pattern switch on there is actually kind of cool too. I tend to keep mine one click past cardioid towards figure 8. There's just something about like that 1 to 2 clicks past. There's something cool that happens there. Yeah, you can tighten up the pattern a little more, right? Yep.
Okay, cool. And then you were talking about the K mic, so I do actually have I have a K87 right here.
Okay,
so
let's go right back to our
upright. You can get
upright.
a feel for like how big these are too. They're small mics.
Yeah,
so
they're easy
compact.
to place.
Yes,
very easy to place. So that microphone, I'm going to go back to the upright bass you brought up. That is one of my favorite mics for doing an upright bass or a cello. It is similar to the Delphos, and I think it's related to the Delphos in a way. I think it's kind of like little sibling. It has that a very natural, little less open than the Delphos, but a very natural top end. But it has a really warm bottom that is perfectly suited for upright bass, for cello, and it's not a boomy mic at all either. It just does a really nice job of picking up that really rich, wonderful low end.
And so when you're recording an upright bass, where are some places, do you ever use more than one mic on the bass? Do you use the pickup in a mic? Do you, have you found that certain spots are a good place to mic up the bass?
Usually I'm one mic in that. If they have a pickup, I'll take it, because sometimes you can do some cool things with that, or sometimes the pickup is the thing you just need to cut. You just roll the bottom out of that and use it for cut, and use the mic for all the wonderful movement. Yeah. But it's usually somewhere around. First off, I'll ask the player, because every one of those instruments is so different. Right. And I've found in my experience that most of the time the players have a pretty darn good idea already of, hey, right in here, you're going to be good. And I'll start there, which is usually somewhere around the F hole, and then I'll just move in or out depending on if I need to, get some proximity effect for some bottom end, or if it's too much depending on how the player plays. Because that instrument can change wildly with how the player attacks it,
Yeah, and I agree. I think upright basses sound very different from each other. I've done a session with an upright bass where I put a mic right up to the fingerboard and I still couldn't hear the bass because there was other instruments in the room. And I was like, wow. And in that case, it just didn't seem to project a lot of outward volume. But instead I took the DI and ran it through an amp and mic'd that in the other room. And that's how we got the bass.
That's cool too.
And then some upright basses are just tons of low end. Some have a boom on certain notes and not others. And, but that's cool. So the K87 was a good choice for that.
Yeah. And there's a live stream we did with Roswell with the Charles Ruggiero band. And it was jazz. So we had, I can't believe I can't remember the bass player's name, but he was fantastic. And it was Larry Gold. It was Charles Ruggiero on drums, Larry Goldings on piano, and I'm forgetting the sax player and the upright player's name. Shame on me. But this band was amazing. It's on the Roswell YouTube channel. You can go see. There's two of them with Charles. The second one has Larry, and we did the upright bass all live in the room. So piano, upright bass, everything. And it was a jazz thing, so it's not slamming. I just put a couple gobos around the upright bass player, and we used a Mini K87. And even the upright player was like, oh, wow, the low end, this is fantastic on this microphone. That's cool.
Yeah, so, and then Rockstars, of course, we'll have links in the show notes so you can click through. Also we have, you guys have a YouTube channel. You've been making a bunch of video content for your studio. And so tell us a little bit about that. And then I don't think I asked you this yet, but you said you've also got a new project, a new website that's launching called Sound of Objects.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you want to give us a shout out for what that is?
Yeah. Okay. So let me see. There's been this last year and a half, I've kind of had a transformation. About a year and a half ago, I kind of was basically one day I was on a session and I kind of realized that I wasn't completely happy with the direction that I had been going for years. Not with music, loved the studio, loved working with everybody. But I was missing a huge part of why I started this thing many decades ago. I'm not going to say the number, but all those decades ago, which was I loved the playing and the writing and the creation, right? That was as a kid. Yeah, I listened to all my favorite bands, but we were trying to make our own music and be like them. And as I built the studio, and this actually started to happen at my studio in Hollywood. And I remember a conversation I had with the owner. One day I just walked out of my studio and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" So we're just chatting. "Oh, I'm doing this for so-and-so. Oh, I just did this TV thing." And he's like, "Well, you still doing your own music?" I'm like, it's not enough time working for everybody else. And he goes, "Be careful." He goes, "If you don't make time, 20 years are going to go by and you're going to do none of it." And I was like, "Yeah,
oh man,
I'm young, I'm whatever." And that was kind of what I thought about a year and a half ago. And there is a video on the YouTube channel that I did that kind of I'm going to change things up and force myself into more me time, back into that artist headspace that I really needed to feed. I mean, it had just like become a weight and I just kept getting heavier and heavier. But something had to give. There's only so many hours a day. The Ultimate Studios Inc. YouTube channel's been a blast doing. We've done tons of live streaming. It's not huge. I'm just shy of 25,000 subscribers. But it's decent. Good group of people come back all the time. But it was built largely on how to record. Like when I started that in 2015, 16, even the live streaming we were doing then was, here's how to record just drums or guitars or whatever. And that was how it was built. So as I tried to start bringing more of just, I make music, man. I mean, that's my day gig, is running a studio making music. That's what I want to do. But I tried bringing more of that into the channel and it didn't, you know how the algorithms can be. That wasn't how I built it. And I took a significant hit view-wise. Some people that were watching loved it because we did the Songs from the Studio series, which was basically 3 to 4 part mini doc on us writing and recording a tune. And it was different people each time. And I loved it because I was creating. The views did not reflect that was something that the channel was wanting. And about a year and a half ago, I realized that I've got to figure out that for my own well-being, my own mental headspace. That thing that was missing. And I had a few conversations with friends of mine that were like, "Dude, if you don't go do it, you're never going to do it,
Yeah, I can completely empathize with you. I know, and I've said this, I've basically spent decades helping everybody else realize their musical dreams as an engineer or producer. And then I hit a point like you where I'm just like, you know what? If I don't just make it happen, I'm never going to go back to making music the way I want to make music. And I don't want to stop.
The good news with that is
because it's fun.
Right. Exactly. It's not to let that go because that's still a huge part of making your own music. And in some ways, I think it's going to help me with the other too, to be honest with you, because I have to go back and see it as the artist as well.
Yeah.
To the point where I've even brought in my partner to do some engineering and stuff and let him produce me even doing drums. I've got a single. I realize this. I don't know. Don't get specific on the date here because by the time this gets out, the single will have been out. But
there you go.
He came in.
You got a single out.
Yes, I have a single out. So we'll just say it that way.
There you go.
But I had my production partner come in and record me playing drums. I didn't even take the laptop. Usually I take the laptop out and screen share and I can run the session. I'm like, I'm not doing that this time. I need to be the player to make it as good as I can and not be the engineer. And even I thought I had the parts out, and then I asked him about a couple things who I trust his opinion wildly from many, many years of working with him. And he's like, if you tried this right here instead of what you're doing, maybe if you just elongated that, it would fit how it pulls into this next. Oh, okay. And then I had to try to figure that out, and I let him produce me, so I just played, and it made it. I wouldn't have done that had it would have been me with screen sharing, out doing it by myself. Right. It wouldn't have turned out the way it did, and it needed to turn out the way it did.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a great experience to start working with other people like that, and to let other people take over what you've been doing for so long. It's not a hard thing to do.
That is, yeah, exactly. And for me, I'm a very DIY. Let's go. Let's do it. I don't like to wait for other people. And that is a great attribute, and it is also a very bad one, because when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it fights everything you do. So letting go is not an easy thing for me, but I'm really trying to. I'm bringing more players in for this, and that's where the Sound of Objects. That's where this was born. That's my thing.
Oh, that's great. So that's your music. You're giving yourself that chance to do it.
Yes, and that website is out now too. That has some info, and it's been a fun year and a half, because when I made this decision, I'm gonna go practice piano. I'm gonna write, which meant I was letting that YouTube channel go. Kind of. I still put things out, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get back to what made that channel good, to where I can maybe do at least something monthly so it keeps moving. But it's a time thing, and the importance at this moment isn't that. It's this.
Well, you know
and
what
where
they
this
say.
is going.
You know what they say, man. You can love YouTube, but YouTube can't love you back. I just made that up. I don't know.
That is pretty good, though. That is, it does. It does
what
weird
do you think,
things to the
Rockstars?
psyche.
Drop a comment in and let us know if you think that makes sense or not.
It can do weird things to your psyche, though. You gotta be willing to take care of yourself and do what's right for you, and the algorithm can sometimes just needs to suck it.
Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your music to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with sound design, Complete 15 has you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea all the way through to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound to the next level. Then polish your mixes off with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11 included in Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Let's rewind a little bit. So having somebody else come in and engineer so you can be a musician, that's a great experience. That introduces things like when you start going and playing music out in the other side of the glass from the, you're not in the control room, you're not in front of the speakers acutely listening to what's happening in the moment, you realize, oh, I don't have anybody who is making sure that what I'm doing in here is translating properly on the other side. Mm-hmm. And what it does for me is it makes you realize, actually, it really, in some ways, it super boosts your sense of confidence as an engineer, because you begin to think, after a little bit of experience that way, you begin to think, oh, wow, all that stuff that I just take for granted when I'm in the control room is a huge deal, or can be, mm-hmm. Like when we're engineering, when we're producing and we're giving feedback and we're helping to guide people and we're letting them immediately know that something worked or didn't work or any of that, it's a huge help to somebody who's a musician. That's notwithstanding the times where you need to just be quiet on the talkback and don't say anything, because the musician knows what they're doing. But when you go become a musician, you begin to appreciate that a lot more, And I've also had a couple of experiences. I've had the ones where somebody else comes in and engineers and does a recording session the way they want in my studio, and I've done ones where I go play in somebody else's studio, like John Finnell's at Relay Recording recently, where he's just doing everything his way.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are really exciting experiences because you get to hear a new sound come out of the speakers.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not what you normally do.
And even though having someone else's workflow can sometimes be a creative catalyst for yourself to maybe go back to your workflow and take a piece of what you had in that session. And then now it re-energizes you a little bit, or it leads you down a new path that you weren't doing before. And I think that perspective is good to have, you know.
100%, 100%. Recently, I'll give another shout out here. This is to Jason McIntyre at Sawhorse Recording. Jason, I gave you a shout out on a previous episode, but I didn't have I just didn't have the studio name on top of my head. So I visited his studio in St. Louis. I was blown away by some of his drum sounds because I just happened to be somewhere where he could play me what he was doing in his space with his way, and it sounded really great. And I immediately came back and I was like, oh yeah, let's see. It was the Shadow Hills on the Mike Pre, and then an API 560 after that. Let me try that. And I had the plug-in versions, I think, so I was able to like mimic some of those things. And it was really fun to do. So there's also that where like you might not have the same gear that somebody else has in a studio,
right,
but you might have the plugins. And so you can come back and kind of fake duplicate it and see what you think. And then also, of course, if you have somebody do something differently in your own studio, then you actually now have that whole setup and you can then understand, well, what'd you do? Oh, that's cool. That's clever how you used this mic in that capacity. And so that can be really, really cool to see. And then you can kind of put that in your quiver, right?
The workflows are almost more interesting to me than what gear was being used.
Yeah.
You know, because I think the workflow makes a bigger difference on the final result than that particular piece of gear. Unless you're doing effect stuff, then okay, then the gear is really important because it's creating whatever sonic effect you're trying to do. But a lot of the times, we can use the same exact gear and have many different results with that same gear by what we do going into that gear, or where that gear was placed. But the gear is the same. It could be the same microphone, but we use that mic in different ways. It could be...
Or get a totally different sound.
Exactly. And that's what I love seeing from other engineers,
And that's sort
producers.
of an instrument performance kind of thing too, right?
Yep.
So is that what you think of? So what are some examples for you of that come to mind of seeing a new workflow and then trying it, and appreciating it?
Well, there's actually one. I was Alex, one of the assistant engineers down at Sunset Sound. He and I were talking the last time I was down there about when we were. I think the conversation was, look, we have one person, but we're stacking that and trying to make it feel like more, because maybe I can't remember if it was a budget thing we were talking about a session. And he said, he's got a stereo ribbon mic, which I use the stereo ribbons, a pair of 4080 Audio Technicas is like my permanent room mics because they're awesome. And he said, take your one person, whether it's a drummer, if it's a string player, and don't move the mic, but move the person in the stereo field with the stereo mic. So if you want to make it sound wide, do 3 positions, but with the mic being the same. So you get the same mic, but they're heavy to the right, but you're not just stacking the same sound. And this seems like such a simple concept because I've stacked things many times before, but I never thought about, use the stereo mic and use the player moving in the room to do it, and then move them further away and do the quasi Bruce Sweden thing where he used to do with Michael Jackson, right on some of those doubles where you did you're right here for the main vocal, back up here for the double, but juice the gain so the volume's the same, but you get a different texture.
Yeah.
And that was, had I not been doing that session that day and had Alex and we just got talking about how we captured things and he brought that up, I'm like, I went back and used that instantly on a snare thing that I was trying to do that I wanted to feel kind of like a group, but have it be still kind of open and not just feel like it was me playing it 5 times. And I was like, oh my God,
so
that
like
works
snare,
amazing.
A drum line kind of effect or something?
Yep. It was like an orchestral thing. And it was really cool. Jay Rustin, I got to do some stuff with him last year. I was fortunate to get to help him out doing some pre-pro recording with Anthrax, which is, as a kid, I mean, I grew up listening to them, so it was so awesome getting to have them in the studio. And I've known Jay for a while, and he's brought a few of his smaller acts in as well, and we'll do recording. And even with the guitars in the ISO booth, we do 257s, and he would have one kind of, I don't know if you can see this, like set up like that, right? So you got one pointed and one sideways, and then we would cover the amp with a packing blanket.
So we'll verbalize that for the rock stars listening, not watching, but he just
right.
So that'd be like 257 mics. So one
On
sort of
axis,
pointed
off
straight
axis.
onto the cone or to the edge of the cone, and one of them's angled the 45
Correct.
degree next to it.
Yes.
Sort of a classic, straight on
Right.
angled mic thing.
And it works really, really well. But then he took a packing blanket, even in the dead ISO, and we covered the whole thing very carefully so it didn't move the mics, and made it as even more dead. And I was shocked that I didn't think you could get more dead than what this particular ISO booth is, and it made
None
those
more dead.
Yeah, it's a good Spinal Tap moment.
Yeah.
But it was cool, and you know what? I've done that a few times since on things when we just wanted it to have that particular texture and feel, and that is something that was not even on my radar. I've put gobos around stuff before to dry it out, but I've never taken heavy packet blankets and literally just covered it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And it's really fun to remember how much sound sculpting we can do acoustically and physically.
Mm-hmm.
That it will have a bigger impact than, like you said, than choosing the gear that we're using to record it with. I mean, I think one of the first places that I discover things like that, well, I mean, the first thing you discover is you've got a microphone or you're singing in your room, and then you go into the stairwell and you sing and you're like, oh, listen to that reverb. Those are some obvious ones as far as discovery goes. And then, in the studio, doing drums, you begin to discover, oh, you can treat the drums. You can put towels and Al Evans on this show hit me to the power of a whole bunch of bandanas.
Yeah.
So I just ordered a whole pack of bandanas, and then the oversized fat, speaking of The Office, which is down the street from you, the black spring paperclip things. The wide ones.
Oh, I haven't
with
tried
the metal. So like, it's like the black metal that goes like that.
Yep.
And then the holders stick out and you can kind of squeeze the top and it opens up.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so those will clip onto the rim of a drum and hold the bandanas in place so that you can like dial in how much deadening you want.
Right.
But like, even before you get that fancy with it, Rockstars, just take your hand and hold your fingertips lightly on the head of a drum and hit the drum and try your hand hitting it different ways and see what it sounds like. That's the thing that I like to do. And then you're like, that sounds kind of cool. Well, you can't keep your hand there for the whole session, although you could if you're the drummer, maybe. I don't know. It depends on the part. But you can make that your reference and then be like, okay, cool. What can I stick on the drum that will give me that sound? Because now I know that sound exists.
I have a bunch of old drum heads that I cut up. So I made, big ones that are kind of like my own big fat snare. I've made my own O-rings in different sizes. I have some where I've cut the middle out. Some I've put gaff tape under to make it heavier. I have a whole box full of just randomly cut up old drum heads that are different types of dampeners that you can just toss on and they all get different tones.
What are some cool, fun things? Since you've got a lot of experience with drums, hip us to some cool drum accessories that we could maybe want to get for our studio that do cool things like that. I mean, I hear about things like the drum tortilla here in Nashville, although I haven't used one. It's more like it's another form of like a big O-ring thing that just covers the whole snare drum. Mm-hmm. There's, you can put your wallet on the snare.
Yep, the wallet
That's
always works.
Trick, right?
You have the snare weight is another good one.
What's the snare weight?
It's a big, like heavy weight that I think it clips onto the edge of the drum and it goes on the top, and it's similar somewhat to what moon gels do, but since it's only on the edge and it has a lot of weight, it doesn't change the feel as much as moon gels do, but it will deaden things up a lot. I like to go cut and make my own up. I have a big fat snare. I have a couple other of the the commercial ones, but that's why I go cut and make up my own E-rings, O-rings. I have like the E-ring. Well, that's I guess what Evans calls it. The Evans E-ring, the Remo O-ring, same thing.
Okay.
I just go to my old drum heads and I cut up different sizes of them. Because sometimes I like to cut the middle out because having it completely covered is too much. Or the drummer's like, it changes the feel. I need to do some ghost notes and it's really flappy. Okay, we'll cut out the center until it feels right and sounds right. Yeah. And over the years, I probably have 20 different old drum heads that. So if you're not a drummer, ask your drummer buddies, hey, let me have some of your old drum heads, and then just get some scissors. Or even another good one, just literally take a drum head and set it upside down on the snare. Don't cut anything out, so it's not going to sit really tight. It's got to be the same size.
And you're actually hitting the wrong side of the head.
Correct. But it creates that you can't do rim shots because it's you have the rim of the head sitting on top of the rim, and it just sounds like a really sharp sound. But what it does to the drum is not what a big fat snare does because it's not just weight directly sitting on it. And it creates a really cool, like splashy kind of sound that's still kind of tight. Because since it's sitting on the rim and not only directly on the head, like a big fat snare sits right on the head, moon gels, you put those on there right on the head, that changes the weight, that changes the character, not only the sound, but how it feels. This other one changes how it feels, but it's not as splatty. I saw Johnny Rabb do that years ago in a clinic, and the sound, I was just like, what the heck is going on? It's like, that's just a head on top of a head, upside down. What a cool idea. So I've used that. I have a few different heads of different thicknesses that are in my bag of rando old heads that I use for that.
Okay, cool. So now treating snares is always fun. Do these O-ring, these cutout drum heads work for toms also?
Yeah. So I
actually try every single one of those same tricks on a tom?
Most of them. I mean, usually not the full like big fat drum thing, although I've done that on a floor tom some, but I have a couple of my, what I call the fat O-ring, where it's basically the whole head, but I cut like a 6-inch hole out of the middle, or depending on the drum, if it's a 10-inch, maybe it's a 4-inch hole out of the middle, and then it just gets bigger for drums. So you're actually hitting the head of the drum, so you get that attack.
Right. So the hole is where you're meant to use for the stick to connect with the real
in the center.
Head. There.
So it's all the way out to like an O-ring style, and then a lot of the times I have my half rings that are just the O-rings. I just cut them in half. So you can set them on the bottom.
And they're just like on the lower part of the drum or something.
Exactly.
Ah, cool.
And 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches. No, not 3.
Oh my God. Now we have to have a cabinet. We have to have an organizer cabinet just for all these rings.
I have a box. It looks like a big pizza box is what it is. And you
that's
just open
clever.
the pizza box and everything just sits there all in there. You just start pulling them out and just, I find that drummers, that's the one thing with the clients that I've been working with. There's a lot of live recording. I work with even these younger artists, like mid-20s, early 20s, that we're recording mostly live or everybody together, even if we're doing more overdubs, or even if they're just coming in to do all the drum stuff. They get into this experimental side. When we start describing, hey, what sound are you going for? Let's try to get that now at the record. Let's start our mix process at the recording stage. They get into it. And once you start doing that, they kind of half the time take over. Hey, do you have this? Hey, can we try that? Hey, what about that snare? Hey, this one might work cool. And all of a sudden it's like kids in a candy store.
That's great.
And
that's
it's a lot of fun.
That's what it's for me, being in the studio feels like being a kid in a candy store. And
well, that's the name of my,
like that.
That's what the name of my studio is. It's Ultimate Studios. It's not, it's not because my studio is better than East West or any of these big, amazing places. It's because every artist that comes through here lets me have the ultimate job. It's all them.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let's see. Let's move away from the snare for a sec. Any tips about getting a kick drum to sound great?
Tuning. Tuning is, and that's one of the hardest ones, I think. Understanding.
So break that down. So we got a beater, a head with a beat where the beater hits it. We've got a head on the front side.
Yeah, so that's your batter
head. Might be
head.
a full head or might have a hole in it. Most likely it's got a hole in it.
I would say the majority of the time there's some sort of hole in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can depend. I mean, that's why for each one of my drums, I have various reso heads. So if we don't want a hole, we're going for a different vibe, we can do that. I just swap the heads out. But getting that tuning relationship right is a big deal, but also not over dampening. That's one with a lot of the drummers that bring their own kits in will have sometimes more often than not have a lot of stuff in it. And a lot of times because they're playing a lot of gigs and they're like, oh man, the live engineers love me. And I'm like, I'll bet they do, because you don't have to worry about this thing resonating, on the stage with everything. Right. But now we need some of that. And since we're in the studio, we can control it. So we start pulling stuff out to get it to sing enough, but yet still keep it tight. And sometimes to get it tight, you only need a large towel that covers the bottom of the kick to take away some of the basketball effect, right? Especially if you have a mic inside it. If you don't want that basketball thing, you don't need a giant pillow, although that is a sound. You just need a good towel that covers the whole bottom, and maybe it's big enough to rest it on the heads a little bit to dampen if you want. And then if you need more dampening, you use another towel just as a specific dampener on one of the heads.
Okay, cool. So that's a good tip, because there are times where we might have a drum in the studio and we're like, maybe it's too dead, or maybe we should deaden it some more. And then we're struggling with trying, like, how do I get this damn pillow through the hole in there? I don't want to take the whole head out. So nice thing about the towel is it's much easier to get something in and out of a space and change your mind as you go. If you have a
large towel, fold it in half and then roll it up. And then you can funnel it through the hole in the head. And then once you lay it on the bottom, you kind of unroll it against the bottom of the head. And then you can position it easy. And if all you need to do is take basketball effect away, that usually will do a lot of that, and it will help focus the kick. If the towel's big enough to where you can have the edges touch either the reso head or the batter head for some dampening, then that's a plus. But if it's not big enough for that, that's why I'll usually have a set of smaller towels that I'll only use to go against one of the heads. And I almost always use towels. I have just looks like Bed Bath & Beyond in my storage room.
Do you feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for more of a simple and straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mix engineer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix in your home studio that will sound great everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. That was absolutely the most helpful and informative block of information and mentoring on the mixing process that I have ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up pro tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, I'm so confident that this will help you take your mixes to the next level, that if you can't get a killer mix in 30 days, I'll give you a refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And hopefully I'll see you in the front row of the Grammys. Okay, great. Great tip. Now, are there any other items that sort of hold those towels in place inside a kick drum in case they seem to be not staying put?
Sometimes I'll use a sandbag, I've used big rolls of gaff tape if they move, and I'll just set them in there, and that'll do it.
Feels like a collection of hockey pucks could maybe be a little bit useful, or maybe they don't weigh enough. I don't know.
No, I don't know how much a hockey puck actually weighs, but something like that could work because it's also easy to get through the hole. Because a lot of the times you're trying to avoid that part of it, unless you have a drummer that's great at tuning. Like I work with Stephen Wolf all the time, and look up his resume of everything he's done. That dude has been involved in everything. I don't even touch the drums when he comes in. I'm like, that's his thing, and it's always just he just dials things in perfectly. So I take a lot of notes with him. How did you do that? Oh, that's how you did it. Oh, you used the tape that way. Oh, it's just a little towel. Oh, it's only a bunch of towels shoved against the batter head. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I make a note of the sound in my head.
What about this? What could it be? Do you find it's occasionally tricky because you can have different artists come into the studio? You can have different bands, different artists. Sometimes you have a great drummer who comes in who the drums just sound amazing, and because they have that kind of studio experience with it. Sometimes you have a young band that just has never even thought about this stuff, and they're totally open to, and it's a no-brainer that you just go in there and start helping them dial their drums in. But then sometimes you have that in the middle where it's like somebody who plays a lot of drums, but they're probably just usually only ever on a live stage, and they might come in feeling very confident about their drums. They know what they love about their drums, but they may or may not know how that translates in a studio. Have you come across that situation? Have you learned anything about how to navigate it as an engineer or producer?
Yeah, those are the toughest ones, honestly, because the ones that are open to it, I would say 90% of the time they just let me tune. They tell me what they want, we talk about it, and then they're like, okay, you do it. Because a lot of drummers are not comfortable with tuning quickly. You know, some not tuning at all. They're like, I hate tuning. Okay, no problem, I got you. You know, and some just, it's like you're trying to do it fast, so they just, you know, let me do it, which is totally fine. The ones that are in the situation like you just brought up, for me, it's a little, it can be kind of tricky because if they know I'm a drummer, sometimes that isn't a plus at first because they think I'm going to be judging, or if I bring something up, it's like, man, I know what come on, you know, I know what I'm doing. So figuring out how to be like, look, I'm on your side. And if it gets to a point where I feel that there's some tension, a lot of times I just mute all the mics and I go in the control, or I go in the live room and just go, hey, here's this. You've got a great sound live and it totally works. But for this song in the studio, we have to tweak it because now we're trying to fit the tune. I'm on your side. Would you be open to just trying a couple things? And if we use a drum or something that isn't yours, it has nothing to do with you not being able to do it because you're still the one playing. We just need to try to find something that fits this particular song better. Yeah. So in the interest of the song, can we try to do that? And usually doing that a couple times and letting them see, look, it's working, and they start to hear it and realize that we're all exploring this together, it gets easier. But there have been a few times that usually when it gets a little tight, you know, is because I am a drummer, you know, and they don't see me as the friend yet, like the helper.
Right. They see as competition in that moment.
Yes. And I try to get, look, I don't want to play. I want to help you sound awesome, and I want to help your band. Or if you're the hired drummer on this, my job first is to the producer that hired me to get the sound for their song or whatever it was. So you and I need to work together to get that for them. Yeah. And sometimes it's just feeling out the personalities a little bit in real time.
You know, and it's funny, as I don't remember if you said the word ego or if it was just an obvious word popping into my head in a conversation where you're like, somebody's, you know, their ego's getting in the way, or on either side, either us as an engineer producer or the musician, the drummer, or something like that.
Yep.
And so we might be inclined to think like, well, don't let your ego get in the way. Well, I'm going to even go so far as to say, don't damage that ego, because you desperately need the drummer to have a powerful ego when they're performing, right? Because you want your musicians to feel super confident. Yeah.
You still have to they have to feel like they're still in charge of it, even if we've changed everything they're using. You know what I mean? Even if the drummer came in with his drums and first we swapped out the snare, and then I'm like, man, those pinstripes that have been on there since 1984 just aren't quite sounding good. Can we try that a little bit? Okay, then those out. You know, if my kick drum I got a 20-inch kick back there that would be perfect for this song to work better, and all of a sudden the drummer's looking down and he's like, his kit's gone, you know. That's a tricky thing to navigate. And I've been on the side too as the engineer, producer, whatever, where I wasn't malleable at all, and I actually made the situation worse because I just went in thinking, no, this is what we have to do. And because I've
been there.
Yeah, I spent probably more time in that headspace than I want to admit. But I didn't come up with the normal upbringing through the studio. I came up as a player that did the studio, so I never got to be that assistant where I got my head smacked a couple times going, dude, calm down. Go get me a coffee because you just messed that up. We'll talk about that later. I did have a couple engineers that I work with that always took my phone calls that I still madly respect, that helped me a lot. A good friend of mine, Scott Francisco, who works for HBO and a bunch of shows now, is one of the best engineers I've ever known and has taught me more, and he's not afraid to put me in my place, which has been fantastic. But since I didn't have that, I brought a different mindset as a player, and I taught for almost 20 years at a music college out here. And that's a different mindset running a classroom than it is running a session. And I had that mindset of the teacher thing, trying to wrangle these different personalities to fit what the lesson was. But when you're on a session, there is no lesson that you're trying to fit everybody into that day. And that personality took me a while to get. I had to really do some self-evaluating and admit, okay, that went south because of how I handled that. So what did I do wrong? How should I have? And that took a little while to be willing to even look myself in the mirror on those things. But once I did, that's when I started really going, oh, okay, well, that person doesn't handle that type of feedback. So I need to figure out how to give that feedback in a new way. So that session, that was my fault. And then all the ones that I deemed my fault after looking at them, I had to figure out, okay, what could I have done in that situation? Okay, if I would have done this, that would have gone a different way. If I would have done this and this, that would have gone a different way. And then it was lots of mental notes. And the more I did that, the more I got to be able to do that now more in real time. So I can catch myself, or I can really just go, no, this needs to be handled this way with this person.
Right. And that's by accumulating all that experience. You're filling up your tool bag with tools that allow you to handle different situations. And I think for all of us rock stars, it's like all these sessions we do, it's one of the reasons why we should do a lot. I mean, even just launching the video version of this podcast, I mean, I'm spending hours doing interviews over video, and I promise you I'm spending all the rest of my hours doing the same thing to just tweak it out, learn it, and practice. Yep. I went over and, I'm going to, at this point, I'm planning to be editing all these videos using Reaper because it will allow me to do video and audio. And so I went and I found, John Tidy, who's been a guest on the show in the past from Reaper Blog, and I hired him for a massive 3.5-hour coaching session on a Saturday. But it's I just want to say that all those experiences we do of doing lots of sessions, and what you said about you were feeling like it took you a while to learn something. It takes us a while to learn things, so it's like it's important for us to let ourselves put in the time on all these things we're doing and love doing in the studio, whether we're, just trying to make the greatest song ever, or we're trying to learn how to record the greatest drums or do whatever. And don't beat ourselves up too badly for the fact that we screwed up along the way, because that's the way that we learn it. So
yeah, you can't be afraid to make a mistake. I mean, I think it's one of my favorite quotes ever is Steve Jobs. I'm going to paraphrase. I don't even have the quote right here, but basically it's, don't be afraid to fail, because you have to make mistakes doing this to get better at it. Try to do as much of that maybe on your own practice time, but then you take what you practice, just like learning an instrument, you practice so you can go do your gig. So the things I practice as a drummer to make the gigs work right. And if something didn't go right on a gig, that informed what my practice was. It's the same thing here. If I didn't quite get the sound the artist was looking for, or if I didn't quite handle all the personalities right, or whatever it is, I got to, I look back at whatever, okay, now that is going to inform the next session. And maybe if it's a sound thing, maybe I need to go, I got some practicing I need to do, If it's a personality thing and I deem that then okay, I got to make a mental note, and that has to stay up here on the next session, so I don't make that mistake again.
But
you're absolutely right. We have to make all those, and you can't be afraid to make them, because you're gonna. I mean, there's no way around it. You're gonna make mistakes.
Well, the way around it is to just never do anything because you're afraid to make a mistake.
Right.
But then you don't
what
move
fun
forward,
is that?
right?
You know how many mistakes I've made on live streams where everyone got to see them? It's way more than I want to admit, and they're all still live on YouTube.
I don't know what's scarier, a mistake on a stage in front of people or a mistake on a live stream. And I mean, that's maybe not a fair comparison, but on a stage, if you make a mistake, they were inevitable, and you could kind of laugh it off, or you could kind of get out of there. You immediately felt nervous because you sensed, people don't like what I just did. On a live stream, once you entered that world of going live on a video, which as two people with YouTube channels, we've dabbled in, probably almost everybody who's watching this or listening to this has had some experience like that. Even a Zoom call might feel that way initially. You're like, you get so caught up, you're like, I don't really know what's this going to do? What's it going to look like on the other end of this when I do this? Is it going to screw up? Oh my God. And then you do some, and then you just probably inevitably you do it, and you're like, oh, well, I don't think the 3 viewers, which was actually me, my mom, and my friend, actually cared.
That's how my live streaming started. It was literally, we'd have 1 viewer, and it was my assistant Hal would be in the lounge up front just checking to make sure the audio was good. And we just, every week you did it, and then you watch it back, you cringe at some of it, and you realize, man, I got to stop saying I got to stop saying so, which that's great because your speaking gets a lot better. But you just, some of the mistakes are coming. Sometimes they become great running jokes. Through the pandemic, I did tons of live streaming. We did live stream concerts. We were streaming twice a week for that first year. We were doing console side chats.
Nice.
And all that. And then we had upgraded all the gear here and just decided, instead of doing as much practicing as I should have to learn it, I'm like, you know what? It's working. Let's just go live. Oh, crap. That didn't work out. And there's an echo, and then it becomes this running joke on the next live stream. Everybody starts bringing it up, and you just kind of let it roll. It's like, your friends coming back 20 years at the class reunion. Remember when you did that thing? And it was, funny. So you just kind of roll with it. At least that's the way I did.
We've been going for a minute, but have you got a moment? Can I hit you with a couple more questions?
Let's do it.
So we talked about other parts of the drum kit. One area that I think, 2 areas that I think would be helpful for the Rockstars are, and they're both cymbals. There's the addressing cymbals appropriately as sort of overhead and what's the right amount of high end and stuff in a recording. But there's also the hi-hat, and very particularly when you're faced with an open hi-hat, which can be it's a little bit like, tambourine will sound great just as long as you're not near any mics.
Yeah. Yes, very true.
So how do you manage, recently I did a session, we had some hi-hat that was opening, and I think I'd heard this and I thought, I'm just going to go do it. I just grabbed wads of paper towels and went and stuffed them inside the hi-hat. And it really had some effect on toning it down and treating how loud the hats were and stuff like that. What do you want to say first about hi-hats?
When you say how loud they were, in what mics?
Let's see. They were showing up in all the drum mics, but they were small diaphragms as overheads. And I think I had a Shure SM98 as a small one above the hi-hat that I could use if I wanted to. But it's just sort of like that classic scenario where the closed hat sounds good, but the open hat's maybe too loud. And if the drummer can't just perfectly control that for some reason. And that comes down. Are there ways
first
to
and foremost is it's how it's played. That is one of those things that you can't get around on the drums. The way the drummer plays them is what we have to figure out with our mic setup, how it works. But hi-hat, if you have options on cymbals, always go through that first, because you may find a pair that is less problematic. Sometimes a little bit of tape, like gaff tape, or even gaff tape, like a fake muffle where you take a little bit of toilet paper, fold it up, put it inside a piece of gaff tape and stick it on there. You can tame it that way, but sometimes it makes the open hat sound really clangy, and now you just ruined the tone, so you have to be really careful with that.
And would you put stuff like that inside the hi-hats?
I would do it on the top. I've also done it with just flat out packing tape, just the clear packing tape, where you just take a couple strips and you just put it on top of the cymbal in a couple spots, because it's not heavy enough to completely alter the tone, but a few pieces of that sometimes dampen the worst part of what you're trying to deal with. If the drummer has enough control that you can suggest playing different, that would be ideal. That is most of the time not the case. And if you get a drummer thinking about that balance, you have just screwed your entire recording up. So that
I think
you have
it's
to be
safe
careful
to
with.
assume. I think it might be safe to assume that if we have a good drummer in there, they're already doing that without it. And then we don't have to bring it up.
Well,
and so if we're thinking about it, we might have a drummer.
Most of the time, but I've done it with some of the drums that come in that are killer. I'd be like, man, can you just tame that how you're hitting a hi-hat when they're open a little bit? And they're like, because even they'll get in there and you got energy going, and oh yeah, no problem, tame it down and then it's all good. But yeah, I would say your scenario is probably the majority for sure.
Yeah. So if they don't have that kind of experience, then, another thing I remember Steve Albini once told me, he was like, oh, sometimes you just throw a set of keys inside the hi-hat and that'll tone it down. And it all probably just depends on the styles and genres of drums and bands too, because
that could be interesting because the weight, it's not a blanket type muffle. Ooh, I'm gonna have to experiment with that one before. I hadn't heard that, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah, except that at the end of the session, it's like, I can't find my keys. Luckily, you hopefully can't.
Don't use your studio keys.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at, I guess what I would do, one is I might, if I'm miking the hi-hats in that situation, sometimes those mics just get muted, but I might use a dynamic mic. I've used a Heil PR30 a lot of times in that instance because they're just smoother. They're a little less reactive than a condenser mic is. And they don't tend to get overloaded as much in that 6 to 8K range that a condenser will when the drummer's got open hi-hats and they're just beating the crap out of them.
Right.
So that's a mic that I've used that actually has helped deal with that a little bit. How
about an SM7? That was, again, shout out to you, Jason. That's one of the ones he said he was using on hi-hat.
That could be another one. Although the SM7 is not that, it still has the characteristic, a lot of the 57, and there's a 3K area in there that can be problematic. Plenty of fantastic records I listened to that SM7s on hi-hats, and they sound amazing. But I like the Heil's, another set of mics that I really dig. Especially those PR30s are fantastic.
Yeah. I was introduced to the Heil's as sort of like this preferred podcasting mic. It was PR30, or is there a PR40 too?
Yep, PR40. Yep.
Yeah, maybe it was those two, and I remember trying them, and I didn't like that on the voice for a podcast myself, but it's cool to hear that being really great for a hi-hat.
They're good.
I think
Tom
my
mics.
voice likes
also
a mic that brings out the edge because I've got this sort of smoky voice.
Right. Yeah. So you find a mic that helps accentuate some of the things that you need to pull out of the rest of your voice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like the Delphos so much. It just brings out that clarity.
Yep. So the overhead,
cool.
the couple things that I do, I've built a couple different baffles that I can put onto mic stands that I can place, like say this is the top of the snare, right? And you got the hi-hats right here, and you got your mic coming in. So I've built these different size baffles that I can get in between the hat and the snare mic, so I can actually block out some of that bleed that helps a lot. Yeah. I also, my overheads, I don't normally do a very overly typical overhead setup where I split, so say that's the center of the snare, right? And the hi-hats are here, and you got your toms. Or a lot of the times,
we've got to verbalize it a little bit for the Rockstars on.
Oh yeah. Okay, how am I
listening? So you can take a piece of foam or like a cut out a smaller size piece of Auralex or something, and I've done it where I've taped that onto a boom arm of a stand so that you have the mic coming in towards the snare drum, but you can sneak this other boom arm in and like position a piece of foam to like block.
It's like a
what
mini.
Do they call it?
It's like a mini gobo that is just like 12 inches by 12 inches or 10 inches by 10 inches. Maybe it's about. I think mine. I have about a quarter-inch piece of plastic, and on both sides I have about a half-inch foam, quarter-inch of foam.
Yeah,
and it's about 10 inches by 10 inches. And I just took a mic clip, and I just took the mic part of it off, and I cut a hole in the bottom of my 10-inch by 10-inch square, and then I screwed the mic clip onto the bottom of that, and that way I can put it on a mic stand. I can put it on a short mic stand. I can put it on a tall mic stand. I use it between a hi-hat and a crash cymbal sometimes. It's a floor tom and a ride cymbal where, they're playing the ride cymbal, and every once in a while I hit a floor tom, and you can't even tell it's a floor tom because it's the ride cymbal bleed. But that's basically what it is, like a mini gobo. kind of thing.
Yeah. For 15 years, I had a famous MCI console at my studio that originally came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made some of the most iconic Grammy-winning records of the 1970s. And it sounded incredible. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to a full digital mixing setup, I teamed up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. The MBSI captures the same iconic sound used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, the movie, all for legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a dual EQ filter switch, adding tools that Bill Simzik said he would have loved to have in the original console. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound at makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Well, when it comes to tom mics, pretty much every crash on the downbeat, I'm just like, I do not like that through the tom mic.
So a couple things there. This is where mic choice to me, I mean, you already know this, but mic choice comes into play. I use one of two mics now on pretty much, well, one of three, but mainly I've narrowed the two that I've been using the most this past year are a pair of S25s from Mic Parts, another Matt mic. And this is one I initially had him make some changes for me, and I think he actually just sells that kit now. It is silver. It's about the same size as the Mini K series, so it's easy to place. Mm-hmm. The rejection is good for a condenser, but the important thing is the rejection isn't phasey. So as long as it's not, and like the crashes aren't completely overtaking, it's actually quite usable spill. So if you're using any sort of, gating or expanding to kind of mitigate that a little bit, you won't get any of the phasey thing that sometimes happens with dynamic mics from the
they can
off-axis.
sound they can make the overhead sound harsh.
Right. The other mic I really love in the case that you have a heavy cymbal hitter is the Audio-Technica ATM 230. And I think it's a play on their ATM 225 that they used to make. It has a pretty steep roll-off happening around 12K, but the pattern is really tight.
And is this for overheads or still for toms?
For toms. And I have found half the time when I use those, if I have that instance where the drummer's hitting them so hard where I need a container, I don't have to do much to the toms after that because the bleed is not that bad.
Yeah.
To non-existent, and it's not, the bleed is also not phasey sounding.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Now, Rockstar's watching this. If you can, if you're watching it, then you get to leave comments. So drop in any comments. If you know of something killer for blocking hi-hats, drop in a comment. If you know something killer for, favorite tom mics or any of these things we talk about, drop in and let us know what your fave is, or if you tried any of the stuff we're talking about. Now,
hey, there's one more thing with that. Just want to mention quick is overheads,
please.
That's the bit. Yeah. Because for me, the overheads are, the majority of my sound, regardless, even if I'm doing death metal, I always try to get the kit that way. But unless it's a really gigantic kit, my overhead setup isn't so left to right, like a typical left to right. Even if you're doing an XY or an ORTF, usually that goes kind of over the middle of the kit and it's pointing left to right. So one of them might be pointing directly at the hi-hats, and the other one is pointing at, the ride or the floor tom. I go more, and I totally ripped off this idea from George Massenberg, and I just tweaked it to fit my recordings. I look at the kit more of an X. So my overheads usually kind of go the left, which I call the hat one, is over the first rack tom. And the second one is over one of the floor toms. So it's actually, I know if you're listening to this, it'll be a little hard, but it's instead of looking at the kit like this, it's looking at the kit like this, because once you do that, I can literally have the left overhead or my hat side overhead pointing, if I wanted, straight down at the floor tom or at the rack tom. And I could have the other one pointing straight down at the floor tom. Now, this does a couple things. One, it gives you killer tom tones with your overheads, and if you're blending that with your close mics, you can get some really great tom sounds. The other thing it does is it mitigates the excessive hi-hat in the overheads, because even if you hard pan them, so you'll get really good imaging that way, you'll find that you can actually use your hi-hat mic a little bit more for placement and cut, because you're not because that left overhead isn't basically only in the vicinity of the hi-hat mic.
So you're not competing the hi-hat mic against the overhead, which is also a hi-hat mic.
But on top of that, if the pointing straight down isn't giving you the best balance, say, between the crashes, once you've measured it, and to make this work, you have to measure it from the kick drum and from the snare. So you take an XLR mic, hold it down to the kick with the beater, go up to the mic, down to the center of the snare, and then you take and go between the two mics to make sure.
Oh yeah, that's
centered.
what I call. I know that one, and I've been thinking of that as kind of like the Recorder Man mic setup, because I think that's where I first.
It's not a recorder. It's not a Recorder Man. It's not. It's
okay.
It's very much not that. But the measuring to do it is the same. The way you measure the Recorder Man is exactly the same, because of where the mics end up, they're not. Your snare, and to get as much centered for the kick and the snare, because you'll get some good kick drum out of it that way too. You have to kind of measure it that way. But to balance, once they're set, all you have to do is start angling the mics a little bit. And you don't have to remeasure. Like, okay, this crash is cool, but this crash over here by the floor tom's nice, but I need more crash. Great, I'm just going to take that mic and angle it more towards the crash and have the drummer go between.
Right, cool.
And since I started doing that, I mean, when I saw George Massenburg do it, his was like really crazy. His front one was almost kind of in the drummer's face, pointing back at the hats and the crash and the tom. And most drummers, and myself included, aren't really a fan of. This is why even Recorder Man sometimes can be.
Your view,
It kind of makes you a little nervous, So I just kind of tweaked it so they could still stay out of the way, and I can get really low if I want. But if the drummer, like Oscar Seaton comes over, he's like 6'5". I got to run the overheads higher, and I'll still do a very similar approach. But it also helps tame overly heavy cymbals a little bit too, because you're not just spot miking cymbals. And while that can be useful sometimes, as a drummer, my favorite drum sounds are when I'm sitting behind it and my head is hearing it, and that has never been next to a cymbal. So I kind of I take that kind of approach, if that makes sense.
Well, that's a great tip, because you're describing using those overheads as looking down at a drum.
Right.
And, that's a great way to get the sound of a drum, is a mic pulled back a little bit.
I'll find some links and send them to you. I know I've done a couple videos once or twice with that, explaining it. So if you want to drop in the description, I also have one with the 230s, Audio-Technica 230s on toms.
Great. Awesome. Yes, thank you. We'll put that in there. And then we can always add stuff in the comments too, links to things. So now, with all that said, it's important in our studios to decide that what we're doing is good or bad, or needs these helps or not, because you've made sound good out in the drum room, but then when we come into the control room, we have to be able to decide. And so, what do you want to say about monitors and like your monitoring in your control room that lets you feel confident about what you're hearing and recording?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one to talk about, because everybody's rooms are a little bit different, but I think it's a really important one, because if you're not hearing things at least mostly accurately, you'll make bad decisions on the recording side too, or you'll think you don't have a problem when you do have a problem, or vice versa. So taking the time to try to make your control room environment, whatever that is, sound as even as possible, the better off you're going to be in the long run. And that may be, if you're in a smaller room, that you know how it is. With the smaller the room is, actually the harder it gets to have good, especially low end response, because it gets quite challenging. The better you can get it, and then find that spot in the room, if preferably at your mix, position or recording position, whatever it is, that that you're getting the most accurate information. I'm not a big headphone guy, but having a set of headphones that well, like for me, these Audio-Technica MX50s go everywhere with me. I mean, I did some work over at Clear Lake, and the control room to me was, a little different, and I didn't have a lot of time to learn it, so I had to do rough mixes at the end of the session. I popped these on because I'm used to them here, so at least I could go, okay, I have a reference I'm familiar with now. So having something that you trust. I switched my monitors up in the last year. I went with the new Atom A8Hs, and I'm actually
cool,
which I love. And recently, as recent as about 2 months ago, I changed their complete position where they are in the room, which fixed another big issue. And I do run the SonarWorks software.
With that, cool. And then I think I saw in the photo you had some NS10s up there as well.
It's the Avantones, the little
those are the
mix
Avantones.
cubes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, cool.
And the Atoms I like because I can run the SonarWorks on the monitors. So I don't have to worry about latency. Yep. I'm not doing a plug-in. Every single thing I listen to is through that. So if I use references of something, I can pull it up in YouTube and iTunes, wherever it is. And I know what I'm listening to is still through that calibrated room.
Right.
And not, I'm not turning a plug-in off in the DAW to have to go listen to that stuff.
Yeah, so Rockstars, if you're familiar with SonarWorks, it can help you with its own kind of, again, I like to say with its own internal AI before we called it AI. It has a robot software that will help tell you where to put the mic, and you can measure it all out and everything. I still think it gives you a software profile of what your room sounds like. And then, but what's cool with the Atom Audio speakers is they have the processing on board the speaker now. So instead of having to put that profile into the plugin and then put it on your DAW and turn it on, turn it off, don't forget to turn it off when you print your mix kind of thing. As Charlie said, you just upload it to the speaker, and now your speakers always give you that sound, that corrected sound.
You can run it computer wide, and I tried that on one of my machines, but man, the latency issues with my setup when I mix, because I print, since I still mix on the console, I print to a second machine. It was just, oh man, the latency was crazy. So with the Atom stuff, all that A series, having the DSP and being able to sit at your mix position with my laptop hooked to the speakers, I can actually turn that stuff on and off and make changes to it in real time without having to go behind the speakers, make a change, go back in the front. And that actually was a huge help. There's also, I still recommend treat your room as much as possible. Don't skimp on that, because that's the thing you're sitting in whether you're doing a mix session, a recording session, a listening session, you're sitting in your room listening to your monitors. It's probably what you use the most, right? So do everything you can given your budget and your room size to make that as good as it can be before you do any of that tuning augmentation with SonarWorks or the other ones that are out there. Right. Because then you'll really get the benefit of that.
Yeah, the software is the icing on the cake.
Right.
First, you got to make the cake, which
yes.
is treating your room, making sure your room already sounds great, which is a pair of speakers in it.
Right.
And Atom Audio, I'm wearing the new Atom Audio H200.
Oh, is that
right now,
how are those? I've been wanting to try those out.
They're great. I've been using them for all these interviews. So I haven't actually done any mixes on them yet, but they sound really good. I mean, you sound great, man.
Well, thank you. It's the Mini K47 into those headphones.
Oh, is that what your voice is on? The Mini K47?
It's the Mini K. I've just got this.
Right on.
I didn't want a pop filter in the way, so.
Yeah. I thought, it sounds really good, man. Sounds really good.
There's acoustics. One thing on the acoustics, there's a GIK and Blackbird Studio recently put out a great video. I think they had some day-long thing at Blackbird, and there's about an hour, 45-minute to an hour-long video of some of the guys from GIK as talking about acoustics and reading the rooms, and they do a really, really good job of explaining the different areas that they found in small rooms. And they actually explained it so well. A few things that have eluded me understanding in the Room EQ Wizard software, I finally understood from that video. But it's a great about 45-minute, 50-minute resource of them going over some of that acoustic stuff. I'll find a link and send that to you as well, because it's just a good one.
Okay, awesome. I love that stuff. All right, great. So let me ask you this question, which I like to ask all our guests. It's a hypothetical question. We get to take the Wayback Studio machine. We go back in time, and you find young Charlie. I don't know if you went by Chuck back then or what, but you're sitting down at the drums or wherever, and you say, "Listen, man, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice do you feel like you'd like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I would learn the business better sooner. The business side of things. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And as I got to into my teaching career, when I was there at the music college, that's what I told everyone that come in. It's like, yeah, practice your instrument. Obviously, that's why you're here. Spend as much time on the business and figuring out what you want to do that way, because that's going to help you more if you want to have a sustainable career than how good you are at any instrument. Because there's a lot of great players out there that just don't know the business. And there's some players that you look at and kind of go, but their business is so great that's why they've been able to make a career for themselves. So understanding the business is the first thing I would have told myself, because I didn't do that right away.
If it's somebody who's young and starting out, or if it's somebody who's got a studio already and they're just want to level it up, does anything come to mind for you about where somebody might begin to go learn that stuff these days? Well,
there's a couple of the colleges, like Berkeley has some good stuff. There's a few really good resources. And now this gets tricky because you go to YouTube, sometimes you don't know what you're getting, but there are a few good channels that really cover the business side for people. I'll see if I can find some links to drop you on that too, just for references and whatnot.
I didn't mean to spring that question on you, but it's just, yeah, I mean, there's so many good books too. I mean, for me, it was learning fundamentals of just like, how does a business even work? Just learning.
And I think that's it, because I didn't learn that part of it. First off, I was just like, my instrument, get better, go do some gigs, everything will work out. And then I saw people around me doing things. I'm like, well, how are they doing that? How's he doing that? And, that whole music business side of things.
Right.
And networking. I mean, that's another one. I know there's so much online stuff, and like this is great because we're in two very different places getting to do this, but it's a people business still. You know, people want to work with people they know and trust. And I found that it's not always the best player or the best engineer or whatever that always gets the gig. It's the ones that people like to work with. You know, there's been times where I definitely wasn't the best musician on the gig, man. I've looked around the room and going, how the hell am I in this room with these people? But you know what? I just fit with the vibe of what everybody was doing, and the hang was good, and we all got along, and that's what made it work. So,
well, I think when I hear you say that too, it makes me think networking, you're meeting other people. When somebody has a project to do, and we know this anytime we've done a project, we're like, I got to put this thing together, and I got to put it together yesterday.
Yep.
Who am I going to work with? What are we going to do? And if that person who's in that situation already has a team in place, well, then they weren't going to use you anyway. So it doesn't even really matter. But connecting with the people who are in that situation where it's like, this thing I got to do yesterday, I don't already know exactly who I'm going to work with. So being top of mind to other people about like, oh, that's right, so-and-so is great on Logic, or so-and-so is really great at drums, or I just saw that guy play play bass great. I should bring him, invite him on the session, or her, whatever. That's probably what networking is really about. It's just being top of mind for people who might think of you when they think of solving that thing.
I even hire other drummers to replace me on stuff I'm doing, because I
thought about hiring somebody to replace you on this podcast.
We could probably make that happen. You know, one of my favorite jokes for drummers always right after sound check is, okay, man, thanks for helping us get sounds. Josh Freeze will be here in a little bit.
Nice.
You know, got to break the ice a little bit.
Yeah, I need to hire somebody to replace me on this podcast.
You're doing a fantastic job.
Charlie, thank you so much for hanging with us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Thanks for being here with cool looking video for our new video channel, Rockstars. If you're listening to this, please come on over to YouTube or whatever the future platform is, if YouTube isn't it anymore, and come subscribe to our channel and come see the videos, because these are looking and sounding great, and it's fun to see Charlie do his hand gestures as he describes where the toms are.
I get excited. So
that's the way to do it, man. Let the rock stars know where should they go if they want to learn more about you, connect with you. What if they're ready to make a killer record out in LA, or they just want to know what kind of music you're making? You
can find me personally at basically everywhere at Sound of Objects, soundofobjects.com. My Instagram, TikTok are both Sound of Objects. My Facebook is just Charlie Waymire. The studio has its own Instagram, which is Ultimate Studios Inc. and ultimatestudios.inc.com if you want to check the studio out. And there's a little bit of overlap between those two things, obviously.
Awesome. Well, dude, thanks for being here. Rockstars, thanks for enjoying this episode. Make sure to hit that, what do we want to say? We've been saying, with Brian Murphy, we've been joking about kick that like button.
I kind of like that. I like kick it. Kick it, man.
Kick it. Kick the like button, subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Charlie, you rock, dude. Thanks for joining us. You rock too,
Lij. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: Isotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is new for us here, and it's a great way for you to help support this show, so I greatly appreciate it. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and for listening. My name is Lij Shaw, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.